The Sorcerer, The Path to Transcendence starting from Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76. The High Priest runs really fast. The sudden sound startled Evelyn. She turned to find O'Connor's eyes open, staring at her. Taking something that's not stealing isn't stealing, Evelyn tried to argue. According to my brother, what I did is taking. She quickly opened the Black Book of the Dead with a mysterious box, and a mysterious gust of wind suddenly swept in. O'Connor crouched beside her, curiously examining the enigmatic book. At %, as if possessed by a mysterious force, Evelyn recited a spell from the Black Book, and a sudden gust of wind blew, as if from another world, carrying an eerie and terrifying aura. "No, you can't," the sleeping American professor cried out, startled awake. But it was too late. Wes, realizing Evelyn had opened the Black Book of the Dead, tried to change the story's course, but to his surprise, everything unfolded as planned. The buzzing sound of insect wings rose, growing clearer and clearer as it approached. Tens of thousands of locusts swarmed toward the Hamunata, covering the entire sky like a black cloud. The sheer number was unimaginable. How could there be so many locusts in the desert? Everyone stared in amazement at the swarming swarms. Their arrival portended something ominous. The locusts swarmed into the camp like a tide, covering tents, camels, and even the people. The locusts were so dense that it seemed as if they had taken over the entire world. The tent fabric nearly collapsed under the weight of the countless locusts, and the camels' backs were also covered with these terrifying creatures, wriggling across their skin, causing them to cry out in anxiety. Not only were these locusts numerous, they also bit. Despite their small size, their bite was incredibly strong, and once they latched onto skin, it was difficult to escape. Some people suffered excruciating stings on their faces, arms, and necks. Others tried to shoo the locusts away with their hands, but the swarms were too numerous to clear. "What are you standing there for? Run!" an American in the crowd shouted. "There are too many locusts to be dealt with guns. Get into the underground palace." "It's safe there," O'Connor, protecting Evelyn, rushed to the underground palace. The others also rushed to the underground palace, their last refuge. Only the American professor did not flee. He knew his curse from hell had been fulfilled. He stood there quietly, accepting his punishment, and was instantly devoured by the locusts. Then Wes began to chant an incantation. From him, a ball of flames exploded in all directions, forming a fire tornado that swept all the locusts away. The intense heat made it impossible to approach, and the air was filled with a nauseating smell of burning. Tens of thousands of locusts were burned to death, their bodies reduced to ash in the flames. Everyone stared in amazement at Wes's astonishing feat. "So he's so powerful," Evelyn whispered. However, burning off this wave of locusts didn't solve the problem. The next wave followed, endlessly. "Locust plague," Weiss frowned, knowing that this wasn't the solution. The 10 plagues of Egypt were a series of disasters recorded in the Bible, and the locust plague was just one of them. It wasn't something that could be stopped by human power. These locusts kept coming, and they wouldn't stop unless Imhotep was killed again. "These locusts are coming because of Imhotep. We must return to the catacombs," Weiss said, and everyone rushed into the catacombs. Weiss was the last one to enter, and he sealed the door. Everyone saw him and involuntarily made way for him, their eyes filled with fear. He walked straight to Evelyn and reached out to take the Black Book of the Dead. Evelyn clutched the book tightly, unwilling to let go. "I think according to the agreement, I should be able to choose 2 items to take away." "Give it to him," Jonathan whispered in Evelyn's ear. "Let go. These things were never yours to begin with." Evelyn hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly let go. Wes put the Black Book of the Dead away, leaving only one sentence: "I advise you to leave Egypt as soon as possible. Great changes are about to take place here." With these words, he headed deeper into the crypt. He wanted to witness the power of the Egyptian high priests 3,000 years ago, and to see the extent to which the Egyptian gods could influence the world. Wes's figure slowly disappeared into the darkness, leaving the group staring at each other in bewilderment. "What should we do?" someone asked helplessly. "Is what he said true? That Egypt will undergo great changes?" "Of course it's a lie. Since we're already here, we might as well find some more treasure to take back." The Americans didn't listen to Wes's advice. Even after witnessing the horrific locust plague and Wes's powerful abilities, they still coveted the treasures within the crypt without fear of death. "We must leave here as soon as possible." Only O'Connor and the other two were prepared to heed the advice. Deep within the crypt, a black skeleton moved with an extremely slow rhythm, each movement accompanied by the scraping of bones against the ground. This skeleton was none other than the High Priest Imhotep, recently resurrected by Evelyn's careless incantation. The viscera of his lover, Ansuna, were sealed in 5 mysterious sacred urns. Now, these urns had been recklessly taken by 5 Americans, blinded by greed and ignorant of their own limitations. Imhotep needed to retrieve these urns to resurrect Ansuna, and since he hadn't yet fully recovered, these 5 Americans were a perfect sacrifice. Within the crypt, Imhotep possessed a special ability to sense the exact location of these 5 Americans. Just as he was about to locate them, a figure suddenly appeared, blocking his path. Weiss stood before Imhotep and greeted him in ancient Egyptian. "Greetings, High Priest. Who are you?" The newly revived Imhotep spoke haltingly. "A wizard." Weiss calmly drew his wand, preemptively striking. "Avada, take the big melon." A pale green light shot from the tip of his wand, like a deadly bolt of lightning, hurtling straight at Imhotep. Though a fragile skeleton at this point, Imhotep displayed extraordinary reflexes. In an instant, he dissipated into a cloud of yellow sand, as if he had never appeared. "Wizard, I remember you, but now is not the time to play with you." Imhotep's voice echoed from all directions, his body completely disintegrating into tiny grains of sand, dissipating without a trace in the air currents of the underground palace. Chapter 77. Come, let's fight. Weiss hadn't expected Imhotep to escape like that. Sure enough, a high priest from 3,000 years ago, he was a master of the art of battle. But he didn't care. He knew perfectly well that, with his knowledge of the key plot points, he could easily predict Imhotep's next move. "If we find the Americans, we'll find Imhotep." Suddenly, a sudden scream pointed Weiss in the right direction. The shrill cries came from somewhere in the crypt, sounding desperate, as if uttering some unbearable torture. The sound bounced off the walls, echoing throughout the corridors. Weiss quickly headed in the direction of the sound. When Weiss followed the sound to Imhotep, he saw several shriveled corpses lying around him. All the life force had been drained from these corpses, leaving only shrunken hues. Imhotep's skeleton, on the other hand, had grown flesh, his body beginning to plump up, his skin coating itself with a faint bluish hue, the new skin gradually healing. Upon seeing Wes, Imhotep chanted a spell, and countless scarabs swarmed frantically from all corners of the crypt, descending upon Wes like a tidal wave. The sheer density of the scarabs was terrifying to watch. When they were about a meter away from Wes, they all stopped, then turned and attacked Imhotep. Imhotep stared at Wes with his hollow eyes in disbelief as the scarabs swooped toward him. He had assumed these scarabs would be his loyal servants, and he couldn't understand why they had suddenly betrayed him. The spell from the Golden Book of the Sun truly worked, effortlessly seizing control of the scarabs. Wes's tone was filled with a mixture of ease and triumph, a declaration to Imhotep that his understanding of the mystical powers of ancient Egypt was far from complete. Imhotep opened his mouth, his jaw dramatically pulled downward, as if it were about to detach from his face and droop onto his chest. The eerie sight was terrifying. Countless locusts flew from his mouth, a black torrent gushing out of Immortan's gaping maw, quickly filling the entire space. The two groups of insects instantly collided, and a fierce battle ensued. The scarabs tore at the locusts' bodies with their powerful jaws, while the locusts fought back with sharp claws and teeth. Countless insect carcasses fell, forming a thick layer on the walls of the crypt. A sickening odor, a mixture of insect fluids and the scent of death, filled the air. Weiss waved his wand and chanted, "Grow larger." With the incantation, dozens of scarabs in the foreground instantly expanded to the size of cars. Their shells shone metallically in the dim light, gleaming with a cold light. Led by these giant scarabs, the once evenly matched battle quickly turned. Giant scarabs charged forward like armored vehicles, tearing at the locusts with their massive jaws and devouring them whole. Other scarabs followed closely behind, forming a tight circle that encircled the swarm. Led by these giant scarabs, the locusts were quickly devoured. Scarabs crawled all over Imhotep, but he didn't seem panicked. Instead, he looked at Weiss with a playful expression, as if challenging this powerful opponent. The scarabs then transformed into wisps of black smoke and swiftly entered Imhotep's nostrils. Drawn by some invisible force, they swarmed into his body. Imhotep's face lit up with satisfaction, as if he had consumed some tonic. His body seemed to instantly become fuller, his strength quietly growing. Weiss watched this scene, realizing that Imhotep could draw energy from these scarabs. He immediately controlled the other scarabs to stop. "Fire curse," Weiss chanted aloud, and a blazing black flame erupted from the tip of his wand. The powerful flame seemed like the wrath of hell, carrying the power of destruction. Like a raging black dragon, the flame snaked towards Imhotep, filling the air with a scorching aroma. The nearby rocks were instantly melted, transforming into a pool of molten lava. Everything in its path was incinerated, leaving behind a scorched earth. A flicker of surprise crossed Imhotep's face at the sudden onslaught of flames. He quickly dodged, but the lingering heat still burned him. The flames raged around him, transforming a portion of the crypt into a sea of inferno. Imhotep's expression grew serious, sensing the threat posed by this immense force. He swirled up yellow sand in an attempt to contain the black flames, but the sand proved fragile against the flames and lasted only 3 seconds before being consumed, dissipating into wisps of ash that drifted away in the wind. Under Weiss's control, the fiery flame shattered into raindrops, enveloping Imhotep like a torrential downpour. Imhotep belched a black mist from his mouth, which quickly expanded into a massive umbrella, shielding him from Weiss's deadly rain of flames. However, under the erosion of the fiery flame, the mist quickly dissipated, unable to withstand the destructive force. The black raindrops fell to the ground, burning tiny pits in the earth like magma, emitting a fiery aura. Obstacles abound. Weiss cast a series of spells, forming invisible walls. Under the spell's influence, Imhotep's movement slowed to a crawl, as if he were mired in a quagmire, and every movement became an immense struggle. Weiss aimed his wand at Imhotep. "Avada, eat the big melon." A green beam of light struck Imhotep again. Despite Weiss's powerful attack, Imhotep did not fall, but once again transformed into a pile of sand. A clone? As expected of the high priest, despite being tricked, Weiss wasn't angry. Instead, he became even more excited, delighted to have met a worthy opponent. "That's interesting." Weiss immediately cast a detection spell, but encountered interference within the underground palace. Mysterious runes were engraved throughout the underground palace, and even after 3,000 years, these runes still exerted their mysterious power. "This isn't a problem for me." From Weiss's sleeves, a dozen golden spheres flew in different directions. These were alchemical tools Weiss had crafted for locating and tracking people. These spheres shuttled through the underground palace, attempting to capture any possible clues. However, the underground palace was too vast, and the spheres, despite traversing every corner, ultimately returned with no useful information. Chapter 78. A good show. Is he hiding, or has he already left the crypt? Wes carefully explored every corner of the crypt. The passages were dark and silent, with only the soft sound of his footsteps echoing in the air. However, after a thorough search, he still found no trace of Imhotep. This convinced Wes that Imhotep had left the crypt. Wes then left the crypt for Cairo, piloting his flying car, his mind racing with the legend of the 10 plagues. He longed to witness the legendary 10 plagues with his own eyes, to feel the awe of their supernatural power. Wes skillfully piloted the flying car, passing over cities one after another, the scenery flashing before his eyes. He successfully arrived at the hotel ahead of O'Connor and his friends. Shortly after, O'Connor, Evelyn, and Jonathan returned to the hotel to find Wes already sitting leisurely in the lobby, waiting. "Aren't you still in the crypt?" O'Connor asked in surprise. His hair was a little disheveled, and beads of sweat beaded his forehead, clearly exhausted from the journey. But the question faded from his mind the moment he thought, his mind preoccupied with the thought of leaving Egypt. "We have to get out of here as soon as possible. This place is too dangerous." Evelyn, however, had different plans. She wanted to stay. "Are you crazy?" Not only O'Connor, but Jonathan was completely confused by his sister's thoughts. "Didn't you see that mummy? Guns are useless against him," Jonathan asked anxiously, looking at Evelyn anxiously, fearing she might make an unwise decision. Evelyn, however, firmly believed that it was her fault for releasing Immortan, and she wanted to prevent it and atone for her mistake. The two argued, their voices growing louder and more heated. O'Connor tried to convince Evelyn that the priority was to protect herself and others, rather than risk remaining in danger. However, Evelyn's stubbornness left O'Connor helpless. In the end, the argument ended in acrimony, and Evelyn returned to her room, feeling a heavy weight weighing on her heart. O'Connor and Jonathan went to the hotel bar, hoping to relax with a drink. They sat in a corner, silently gazing at the liquid in their glasses. O'Connor's brow furrowed, Jonathan's face blank. Both remained silent, lost in their own thoughts. As for Wes, they were once again completely ignored. He remained unfazed by their attitude, sitting quietly to the side, not joining in the argument, but observing each other's moods. The adventurers who had been to Hamunaptra were gathered in the bar, celebrating their escape from that haunted place. They chatted and laughed loudly, their glasses clinking together with a resounding clatter, filling the bar with laughter as each shared their adventures and testified to the other how lucky they had been to escape. Someone excitedly poured their drink into their glass, only to spit it out the next moment. Puff! Suddenly, the bar erupted in the sound of spurting, and everyone dropped their glasses. "What's that smell?" he asked, his brow furrowed, his eyes fixed on his glass, which exuded a strange odor. "Why does it smell like blood?" another man exclaimed in horror, trembling as he set his glass down, his face pale. O'Connor keenly noticed that the water in the hotel's fountain had turned bloody, the red liquid shimmering eerily under the light. Outside the hotel, shrill wails began to echo. The people of Cairo were horrified to discover that the river had also turned blood red. The fish that once swam freely in the river had perished, and the water, emitting a sickening stench, was unusable. 10 plagues. The 10 plagues have come. Gigantic hailstones suddenly rained down from the sky, accompanied by the roar of thunder and the howling of a mighty wind, like the hammer of judgment on the apocalypse. Like cannonballs, the hailstones mercilessly destroyed crops, houses, and livestock. Pedestrians on the streets panicked and sought shelter, but the hailstorm was too devastating. Those unable to escape could only huddle in corners or under eaves, praying for a swift end to the disaster. Even those who had previously harbored hope were forced to believe that the legendary 10 plagues had truly befallen them. Weiss, however, keenly noticed something unusual. The scale of these 10 plagues was limited to Cairo. According to ancient records, the 10 plagues should have affected all of Egypt. So far, only a plague of locusts, a plague of hail, and a plague of blood had occurred. Everything seemed under control, far from comparable to the legendary 10 plagues. The streets and alleys of Cairo were filled with people kneeling. These people prayed devoutly to the Egyptian gods. Elders knelt on the ground, hands clasped together, muttering incoherently. Children clung to their parents, their sobs rising and falling. Their chanting grew louder, gradually blending into one, wave after wave, impacting the hearts of the people. Something invisible to the naked eye slowly floated into the air with their prayers, then vanished, as if drawn by a mysterious force. "Is this faith?" Weiss observed from the outside of the crowd. What did these invisible forces signify? Weiss increasingly felt that Imhotep's resurrection was no accident, but rather a carefully orchestrated plan. He recalled his experiences at Hamunaptra, and it seemed as if a deeper reason lay behind all this. During this period, Egypt was colonized by the British, severely impacting its economy, culture, and faith. Britain's powerful ships and cannon shattered the nation's once confidence. Facing the might of the British army, their prayers went unanswered. Life for the Egyptians grew increasingly difficult, and they began to doubt everything they once believed in. They began to trust their guns as their only means of protection. Against this backdrop, releasing Imhotep to trigger natural disasters and harvest faith, could this be the true purpose of the Egyptian gods? Through these natural disasters, the gods seemed to be trying to awaken people's reverence for the ancient faith. As for the people who died, the gods seemed to be of little concern. What a show! Imhotep, O'Connor, and Evelyn are just pawns. Weiss sighed at the thought. Chapter 79 Roadblock. As the prayers continued, the ferocious hailstorms gradually slowed, finally ceasing completely, leaving only a devastated mess on the ground. The bloody water gradually returned to its normal color, its once sickening crimson fading to a clear stream. The river water became transparent again, and people flocked to its banks, scooping up the water as if nothing had happened. The gods. They haven't abandoned us, the crowds began to chant, many falling to their knees in tears as they praised the Egyptian gods, expressing their gratitude and devotion. It was expected that worship of the Egyptian gods would grow exponentially, given the miracles they had performed. They saw this as divine favor and protection, a ray of hope amidst despair. However, Weiss saw more to the story. Something must have tripped up the Egyptian gods, otherwise, this disaster wouldn't have lasted so long. Their influence on the human world is waning, forcing them to stage this drama, He understood that this seemingly miraculous disaster and redemption was merely a measure taken by the gods to maintain their authority. Perhaps their power was waning, and they needed this method to rekindle people's faith and consolidate their position in the mortal realm. At this moment, Imhotep had quietly infiltrated Evelyn's room, his eyes fixed on the woman who had awakened him from his long slumber. In Imhotep's eyes, she was undoubtedly the perfect vehicle for Ensuna's resurrection. He had already devoured 4 Americans, and was only one crucial step away from complete resurrection. Just when he thought he was about to succeed, Wes's voice shattered the night silence. "You won't succeed." He stood in the doorway, wand in hand, staring at Imhotep silently. "Wizard," Imhotep whirled around, glaring at Wes. "You again? Are you here to stop me?" Wes slid down to sit on the sofa in the room. He didn't answer Imhotep's question, but simply stared at him silently. Imhotep, enraged by Wes's attitude, was about to strike when O'Connor and his men burst into the room. Everyone held their weapons tightly, ready for any eventuality. Evelyn was also awakened by the sudden noise. Seeing Imhotep standing beside her bed, she leaped from her bed in terror and frantically ran behind O'Connor. The people at the door, seeing Wes and Imhotep facing off, hesitated, and the atmosphere in the room reached a fever pitch. Imhotep, upon seeing the final American, suddenly formed a new plan. By devouring this man, he would be fully resurrected, fulfilling his long-cherished wish. He raised his hands, and a vast expanse of yellow sand suddenly filled the room, surging wildly and converging into a small sandstorm. The sandstorm swirled through the room with a terrifying roar, sucking furniture into the vortex, sending debris flying everywhere and plunging the room into chaos. The sandstorm swept towards the American, determined to devour him. Meow, a white cat suddenly appeared in the room. It was adorable, leaping gently onto the piano, but in Imhotep's eyes, it was terrifying. Imhotep seemed terrified by the cat, transforming into a gust of yellow wind and escaping through the open window. The whirlwind of yellow sands in the room instantly dissipated, and Imhotep vanished with it. Wes immediately cast a levitation spell to follow. His figure, like a light feather, drifted through the air, hot on Imhotep's trail. Seeing both of them gone, O'Connor hurriedly led everyone away from this eerie place. "Let's go. It's not safe here." Wes and Imhotep engaged in a thrilling chase across the skies of Cairo. Wes followed closely behind, chanting spells in an attempt to disrupt Imhotep's progress. Imhotep, using his speed to his advantage, constantly shifted directions, trying to escape Wes's pursuit. Imhotep suddenly stopped atop a temple spire, chanting aloud. Under his magic, the nearby river water surged up, raising huge waves that seemed to swallow Wes. Wes reacted quickly, and his wand shot out a blue light that pierced the night sky like a sharp sword. The moment it touched the river water, the light froze the river water, forming a spectacular ice wall. The ice wall was crystal clear, exuding a cold aura, blocking the attack of the river water. "I didn't expect you to have such skills," Imhotep sneered. Wes did not respond, but continued to chant the spell. Under Wes's control, several black spheres shot towards Imhotep like meteors. These spheres drew black tracks in the air at an extremely fast speed. Seeing this, Imhotep immediately summoned a swarm of locusts. The swarm of locusts was black and dense, covering the sky and almost blocking the moonlight. The black sphere exploded as it approached the locust swarm. Boom, boom, balls of flame exploded, the powerful impact incinerating over half the locusts, sending them plummeting to the ground. Weiss waved his wand continuously, and ice knights appeared one after another. They quickly gathered around Weiss, ready to fight the creatures summoned by Imhotep. Each of these ice knights was tall and majestic, clad in ice armor and wielding ice swords. With their blades brandished, they swiftly charged at Imhotep. Imhotep seemed prepared. With a wave of his hands, he unleashed a gust of wind. The wind howled, carrying the knights high into the sky, and then they plummeted to a crushing smithereens. The ice knights shattered in midair, their debris falling to the ground with a crackling sound, disintegrating into countless ice crystals that scatter everywhere. Then, the temple beneath Imhotep began to desertify, sand pouring out from the cracks in the floor, covering the entire building. The monks within the temple were reduced to mummies beneath the yellow sand, their skin withered and their muscles atrophied, leaving only a thin layer of skin and bones. They staggered out of the temple, their eyes glazed over. Like the Walking Dead, these mummies had become Imhotep's soldiers. Seeing this, Weiss launched a counterattack. Black flames, controlled by Weiss, rose up like a demon's roar, burning the yellow sands and the mummies to ash. The flames, as if alive, danced in the air, forming giant eagles. The eagles swooping down on Imhotep at breakneck speed. Chapter 80. The ceremony is about to begin. Having already witnessed fiend fire, Imhotep didn't want to take this blow head-on. Sand soldiers formed a dense formation in front of him, forming a solid wall like a towering arhat, protecting Imhotep. Imhotep didn't want to engage in a fight with Wes. He had more important things to attend to, and fighting Wes was undoubtedly a stall for time. So, he began chanting a spell, and within a radius of dozens of meters, houses, temples, and trees began to rapidly transform into sand. Under his control, a massive torrent of sands formed. The torrent of sand was mighty, like a storm at the end of the world, engulfing the surrounding buildings and trees, forming a massive, swirling storm that temporarily trapped Wes. When the tornado dissipated, Wes was unharmed, but Imhotep had lost sight of him. I still wanted to talk to him properly, but the High Priest is too impatient. Wes sighed. Morton's target is Evelyn. All we need to do is keep an eye on her. Finding Evelyn was easy enough. After all, Imhotep's attention was focused on her. O'Connor, Evelyn, and their group tried to leave Cairo, but the entire city was under Imhotep's control, becoming his puppets, like zombies, constantly chanting Imhotep's name. Although O'Connor and his companions drove recklessly through the streets, trying to escape the crowd, they were forced to halt. Damn it, O'Connor cursed loudly. They jumped out of the car and fired relentlessly at the people who surrounded them. But the controlled people were like zombies, showing no fear, nor did they dodge. Bullets pelted them, but they mechanically continued forward. They retreated repeatedly, trying to find a way out, but the crowd surged forward like a tide. O'Connor and his companions had limited ammunition, and their bullets were ineffective, as the controlled people had no fear of pain or death. At this moment, Imhotep absorbed the life force of the last American. He was fully resurrected. O'Connor and his companions were trapped. Evelyn, watching the people being held captive, made a decisive decision. She threatened Imhotep with her own life, forcing him to release O'Connor and his companions. If you dare harm them, I will commit suicide, and you will never be able to resurrect Ensuna. Imhotep agreed, but this was all a delaying tactic. Once he had Evelyn under control, he immediately ordered the execution of O'Connor and his companions. However, O'Connor, cleverly, had already escaped Cairo through the sewers. Weiss had witnessed all this, and just as Imhotep was about to approach Weiss to seize the Black Book of the Dead, Weiss appeared before him. The fully resurrected Imhotep's eyes gleamed fiercely, and his threatening voice echoed through the air. Wizard, he was about to strike, but Weiss calmly pulled the Black Book from his arms. I think we can talk. Give it to me, and I'll let you go. It seems the complete resurrection has boosted the High Priest's confidence. Weiss was no pushover. While Imhotep was formidable, the Black Book of the Dead in his hand was also a significant bargaining chip. While Imhotep was confident of defeating Weiss, it would undoubtedly take time. And right now, time was what Imhotep lacked most. Every second was crucial, as he had to complete the ritual to resurrect Ensuna within a specific window. What do you want? Imhotep finally compromised, unwilling to waste any more time on this sorcerer. I just want to verify something. Weiss's words left Imhotep hesitant, unsure of what Weiss was up to. As Weiss turned to leave, Imhotep stopped him. Whatever your purpose, don't stop me from resurrecting Ensuna. That's one of my purposes, too. Weiss's response surprised Imhotep. He wondered what this sorcerer's motive was behind repeatedly trying to stop him, and now willingly cooperating in handing over the Black Book of the Dead. What was he planning? But Imhotep didn't have time to dwell on this question. Imhotep, along with Wes, Evelyn, and Benny, hurriedly arrived at Hamunaptra just as dawn was approaching. The sky still held a lingering hue of dusk, and Hamunaptra loomed in the haze. Suddenly, a sudden roar shattered the desert's tranquility. Imhotep looked up and saw a plane, like a gigantic steel bird, roaring overhead, its engine roar echoing across the empty desert. Amidst the roar of the plane, Evelyn's face lit up with unconcealed joy, her hope of escaping the desert. O'Connor, Amir, and Jonathan were aboard the plane. Imhotep noticed a change in Evelyn's expression, and a flicker of irritation crossed his face. The plane's appearance could jeopardize his plans, and he would not allow any unforeseen consequences. He suddenly raised his hands, and powerful magical energy surged forth like a surging tide. Yellow sand was whipped up wildly, forming a sandstorm that obscured the sky. It threatened to completely obscure the entire sky. The plane, facing this catastrophic storm, was like a tiny, insignificant ant, teetering on the brink of collapse, threatened at any moment by its overwhelming force. "We have to find a way to stabilize the plane," O'Connor shouted, his voice nearly drowned out by the roar of the engines and the whistling wind. O'Connor gripped the control stick tightly, sweat streaking his forehead. Amir and Jonathan clung to their seats, their hearts pounding in their chests, as if threatening to burst their bodies' restraints. Evelyn's heart leaped into her throat. She watched the plane struggle in the sandstorm, her eyes filled with worry. If the plane crashes, O'Connor and the others will face unimaginable danger. "Wes, help them," Evelyn was distraught. She clung to Wes's arm tightly, her eyes filled with pleading, desperately asking for his help. "They'll be fine," Weiss's answer made Evelyn despair. She widened her eyes and glared at Weiss, her face full of disbelief. In this critical moment, she rushed towards Imhotep desperately, and her lips were tightly pressed against his lips at that moment. It was an impulsive act, an instinctive choice. She hoped that in this way, she could interrupt Imhotep's magic and buy time for O'Connor and the other two to escape. Imhotep's body stiffened at that moment, and his magic stopped abruptly at that moment. Chapter 81 Resurrection. The plane teetered in the sandstorm. O'Connor, Amir, and Jonathan struggled mightily. Only after crashing into the distant desert did Imhotep, upon seeing the plane's demise, slowly withdraw his power. Evelyn gazed in the direction of the crash with a look of worry, her hands clasped tightly together, silently praying for O'Connor and the others' safety. Wes, Benny, and Evelyn then followed Imhotep into the crypt. The passages wound, and the walls were carved with ancient, intricate patterns. Every stroke embodied the ancient Egyptians' profound understanding of life, death, and rebirth. Imhotep's fingers gently brushed over the patterns, sensing the power imbued in them, a power he had once known. With familiarity, Imhotep found the altar, the crypt's most sacred site. Carved with the image of the sun god, the altar symbolized the source of life and power. Without mercy, Imhotep bound Evelyn tightly to the altar. Evelyn struggled relentlessly, her wrists chafing from the rough ropes, like a trapped bird desperately trying to break free. Imhotep gently placed Insuna's body beside Evelyn, his eyes filled with affection. He whispered, "My love." Weiss, standing behind Imhotep, waved his hand gently, and the Black Book of the Dead, as if drawn by an invisible force, slowly floated into Imhotep's hands. Then Imhotep neatly placed the 5 sacred urns he had seized from the Americans on the altar. His gaze swept over the urns, which held fragments of Insuna's soul, the key to her resurrection. Deep within the crypt, the dancing torchlight cast distorted shadows on the ancient stone walls. He began to chant a mysterious, ancient incantation, his voice deep and drawn out. Black smoke slowly drifted from the 5 sacred urns, as if animate, absorbed by Insuna's body. Evelyn watched in horror. She could sense the evil power woven into the black smoke. If it were fully absorbed by Insuna, she would perish utterly. She began to struggle even more frantically, a single thought in her mind: she had to escape. She had to stop this. Crack, crack, as Evelyn watched in horror, Insuna's body began to stir slightly. Her fingers trembled slightly, and then her body began to sway gently. Then, Insuna began to breathe heavily, like a drowning person rescued from shore, greedily breathing in the air, as if taking in the very breath of the world. Insuna, Imhotep's urgent voice echoed from the crypt. His eyes were fixed on his beloved, the fiery passion in his gaze igniting the air around them. "Kill her, and you will be fully resurrected," Imhotep said urgently, solemnly handing Insuna a dagger. The dagger gleamed with a bone-chilling cold in the dim light. Insuna took the dagger steadily and slowly rose to her feet. She raised her hands high, the sharp tip of the dagger pointed directly at Evelyn's heart. In the next second, she would plunge the dagger through Evelyn's heart, completing the crucial step in her resurrection. Bang! Ling! A bullet, streaking with lightning speed, struck the dagger in Insuna's hand with impeccable precision, its powerful impact sending it careening backwards. Insuna was nearly knocked over by the force of the impact, her body swaying several times, but she eventually regained her balance. "O'Connor. Brother," Evelyn stared at the 2 men who had suddenly appeared in surprise and delight. The revolver clutched tightly in O'Connor's hand still emitted wisps of smoke, evidence that he had just saved her. Imhotep's expression darkened at that moment, and he hurriedly studied Insuna. "You inconvenient insect," Imhotep roared. A powerful force erupted from his body, shaking the entire underground palace. The ground began to tremble, Dust rising as something awoke from its slumber. A dozen mummies rose from the earth. They were monks who had served Imhotep 3,000 years ago, now awakened at Imhotep's call. They wore ragged robes, tattered by the wear of time. They held ancient weapons, spears, their tips gleaming with a cold light, scimitars, their blades etched with the marks of time. Their eyes were hollow and cold, devoid of any emotion, only absolute obedience to orders. "Kill them," Imhotep roared. The mummies sprang into action, brandishing their weapons and charging at O'Connor and Jonathan. Bang, bang, bang. O'Connor's revolver seemed to come alive in his hand, each pull of the trigger accurate, but the bullets were but a tickle to the mummies. The mummies continued their menacing advance toward O'Connor and Jonathan. Just then, Jonathan shouted, "Go ahead!" A golden sword flew out of the darkness, slicing through the air with a golden trail, hurtling straight toward O'Connor. As if possessed of its own consciousness, O'Connor's arm caught the golden sword with a single steady hand. The blade gleamed dazzlingly in the sunlight, awakening in O'Connor's hands, imbuing him with unprecedented power. He wielded the sword with fluid, natural movements, as if a natural swordsman. The mummy's attacks were rendered vulnerable to his blade. Wherever his blade passed, the mummies were easily sliced and chopped, eventually falling to the ground. His power had intensified, and he suddenly acquired swordsmanship. Was he cheating? Wes watched O'Connor's figure, watching the golden light grow brighter and brighter. The light seemed to echo his sword dance, and with each flash of the sword, the golden light rippled, like the manifestation of some mysterious power. Imhotep had clearly noticed the unusual change in O'Connor. He had never seen such power before, and he intended to personally resolve this thorny issue. The Golden Book of the Sun, Evelyn's voice echoed through the underground palace. The Golden Book of the Sun contains a spell to defeat Imhotep. It's hidden within a statue of the sun god. Jonathan, upon hearing Evelyn's cry, immediately turned, about to search for the crucial Golden Book. Before he could take a step, Wes's voice rang out in the tense atmosphere. "Are you talking about this book?" He pulled a golden tome from his bosom. The cover was engraved with a sun image, emitting a faint glow. "The moon tonight is large, round, and bright. I wish you all a happy Mid-Autumn Festival. May your families be reunited." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82: God's Descent. Everyone's attention was drawn to the book in Weiss's hands, spontaneously focusing on the Golden Book of the Sun. Imhotep's pupils suddenly constricted, revealing a deep fear. To him, the Golden Book of the Sun was a symbol of the pharaoh's authority, a power bestowed by the sun god, and the faith he had once betrayed. He could sense the power contained within the book, a power that could seal him, even destroy him. He held the Golden Book in deep fear. Evelyn's gaze was fixed on the Golden Book of the Sun, and an uncontrollable excitement welled up in her heart. This book was the sacred object her father had pursued his entire life. She remembered her father describing its wonders countless times, saying that it contained the power of the sun god and could dispel all evil. However, when her gaze shifted to Weiss, her heart sank. Weiss was no longer their friend, he was now their enemy, a powerful one. "Give it to me," Imhotep said, his face as gloomy as water, advancing step by step towards Weiss. "Wizard, you are not worthy of the Golden Book of the Sun." Imhotep's words were filled with authority and dominance, declaring his absolute ownership of the book. "Then you, the sinner who betrayed the pharaoh and was punished by insects, are worthy." Weiss's words precisely stung Imhotep's unspoken past, his deepest shame, a stain he could never erase. The tension between the two men reached a fever pitch, the tension threatening to erupt into a violent clash at any moment. At that moment, O'Connor seized the opportunity to confront them, brandishing his greatsword and forcing Insuna back with a fierce force. He then cut off the restraints on Evelyn's hands and feet, then shouted to Jonathan, "Take her away." Jonathan immediately lifted Evelyn to her feet, and the two of them sprinted towards the exit. Seeing the sacrifice about to escape, Imhotep, regardless of the confrontation with Weiss, used magic to construct a high wall, firmly blocking the exit. "No one can leave," he slowly chanted an obscure incantation, accompanied by a rustling sound. Countless scarabs swarmed from every corner of the underground palace. Like a black tide, they surrounded O'Connor and his companions. Holding torches, they tried to push back the scarabs. The scarabs were simply too numerous. They swarmed densely, the circle shrinking, and some even crawled onto their shoes. "Think of something," O'Connor shouted, swinging his greatsword through the air, trying to slash at the approaching scarabs, but the sheer number of them rendered his efforts futile. "We can't die here," Jonathan's voice tinged with despair, yet he managed to remain calm. Boom! A hole suddenly blew through the wall, and Amir appeared. Wrapped in explosives, Amir rushed toward the scarab encirclement. "What are you standing there for? Run!" He lit a stick of dynamite and threw it around, blowing a hole in the scarab's encirclement. O'Connor quickly grabbed Evelyn and Jonathan, attempting to escape through the opening. They brushed past Amir, who ignited all his explosives and charged at Imhotep, determined to die with him. A massive hand made of sand suddenly appeared and grasped Amir. Imhotep clenched his right hand, and the sand hand tightened. With a horrific cry, Amir began to bleed from all his orifices, his body twisting and deforming under the hand's pressure. Bang! The dynamite exploded, shattering Amir into pieces and shattering the sand hand. O'Connor watched helplessly as Amir was shattered into pieces, his eyes bloodshot and the veins on his neck bulging like earthworms. "No!" he roared in grief and indignation, clenching his fists, the rage threatening to consume him. "Your turn is next." Imhotep's body floated in midair, charging towards the three. Evelyn's face was in panic, and Jonathan's legs were trembling, barely able to stand. O'Connor lowered his head, his expression unreadable. The air was filled with a suffocating tension, as if the entire crypt was holding its breath, awaiting the next moment. Just as Imhotep's right hand was about to grasp Evelyn, a flash of swordlight flashed, its trajectory almost invisible. Paw! A severed hand fell to the ground with a dull sound. Imhotep stepped back in horror, clutching his right arm in pain. The fragment fell to the ground, its cross-section completely charred, yet not a drop of blood escaped. O'Connor raised his head, his eyes white, his pupils invisible. His hair moved without a breeze, and the golden sword in his hand ignited with golden flames, emitting a dazzling light. Rah! Imhotep stared at O'Connor in disbelief, feeling an unprecedented fear. "It's finally here," Weiss thought to himself. This was exactly what he'd been waiting for. O'Connor's current situation was known in the East as summoning a spirit, and in the West as divine descent. Even though it might only be a fleeting consciousness of a deity, Imhotep felt a sense of formidable danger. As for Ansuna, she knelt on the ground, trembling as if she had seen her end. "Sinner!" O'Connor's voice was ethereal and commanding. He pointed his longsword at Ansuna, a stream of golden flame erupting from the tip. Just as the flame was about to strike Ansuna, Imhotep stepped in front of her. He opened his hands, and the flame was stopped as if by an invisible barrier. The intense heat distorted the air. Imhotep gritted his teeth, sweat beads forming on his forehead. "HMPH," O'Connor snorted, clearly dissatisfied. He increased the power, and the golden flames grew even hotter, carrying the power to incinerate everything. Imhotep's knees began to bend, the flames kept approaching, began to burn his arms, and the flesh made a sizzling sound. But at this moment Imhotep still stubbornly persisted. "Let me see the gap between me and the god." Weiss took action. He chanted a spell, the temperature began to drop sharply, frost spread from the ground, and the ice began to condense into various weapons, spears, axes. These ice blades, under Weiss's control, flashed with cold light and pointed directly at O'Connor. O'Connor stood in place, holding the greatsword tightly in his hand, with the tip of the sword pointing to the ground. When those ice weapons whizzed over, his body was surrounded by an invisible force, forming a transparent barrier around O'Connor. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Chapter 83 Trial. Before these icy weapons could even reach O'Connor, they were transformed into gas by an immensely powerful force, vanishing without a trace. A suffocating, oppressive feeling permeated the air. Outsider, O'Connor's eyes, hollow and pupilless, stared at Weiss. "Are you seeking to intervene?" His voice carried an air of authority, as if his words were law, unchallenged. Weiss's heart tightened. He could sense the power emanating from O'Connor. It was a power beyond mortal. O'Connor was no longer an ordinary man. Weiss wasn't surprised at his identity being revealed, nor was he intimidated by the divinely summoned O'Connor. Although O'Connor's power had increased significantly since the divinely summoned O'Connor, it was still far from enough to intimidate Weiss. There's a threshold for the power a god can bestow. This is a rare opportunity to test his prowess against a god. Weiss decided to give it his all. He slowly lowered his hands, and seemingly casually, from his sleeves, as if by magic, 13 spheres of varying colors, each radiating light, floated out. They swirled and danced in midair, their radiance illuminating the interior of the underground chamber. 8 of the spheres fired different beams, attacking O'Connor like a torrential rain of light. There were icy beams of freezing light, freezing the air in its path, forming a thin layer of frost. There were blazing flames, blazing as if consuming everything trash, and there were eerie beams that could instantly turn anyone to stone. Wave after wave of attacks followed, but O'Connor showed no fear, effortlessly fending off Wes's attacks. He thrust his greatsword into the ground, and instantly, a powerful shockwave radiated from the sword, its force like an unstoppable storm, neutralizing Wes's attacks. The overwhelming force repelled Wes, forcing him back a few steps. Immediately, O'Connor vanished from sight, reappearing behind Weiss, his sword piercing Weiss's back like lightning. Weiss reacted just as quickly, his 5 spheres forming a pentagram, instantly forming a magical shield that blocked O'Connor's fatal blow. 6 black chains, like venomous snakes, entwined themselves around O'Connor's limbs and head. Weiss chanted an incantation, and as the spell progressed, the chains tightened, binding O'Connor tightly. O'Connor raised his hand, calmly observing the chains, making no movement. The next second, flames erupted from his body, rapidly heating the chains and igniting. In a split second, the 6 chains were reduced to ash. God's edge, shadowless, Weiss's one sliced through the air with a sharp sound, and a piercing light shot towards O'Connor like a sword. O'Connor raised his sword and swung it, once again shattering Weiss's attack. But O'Connor seemed to have lost his patience. Golden flames began to blaze around him, blazing like the sun and radiating immense power. Weiss, observing this, cast a freezing spell in an attempt to extinguish the flames. However, the freezing spell had no effect. The golden flames continued to burn fiercely, unstoppable. However, O'Connor didn't aim his attack at Weiss. His target was only Ansuna and Immortan. O'Connor's sword, shrouded in golden flames, slashed down at the two with overwhelming force. Immortan, seeing this, raised his arms to block the blow, but the sword, like a hot knife through butter, continued to move forward, its momentum undiminished. Just as it was about to strike Immortan's head, Ansuna stepped forward without hesitation, blocking his path. With a dull thud, Ansuna was neatly split in two by the sword, falling to the ground. No, Imhotep screamed in despair. He frantically danced over Ansuna's body, casting some mysterious spell, trying to piece her back together. However, no matter how hard he tried, Ansuna remained unresponsive, lying motionless on the ground like a shattered puppet. Ansuna had once again sacrificed herself to protect Imhotep. Pain and despair crossed Imhotep's face. He clutched Ansuna's body tightly, his entire world crumbling in that moment. Ah! Imhotep roared with utter grief and indignation, looking up to the heavens. Why, sinner? O'Connor raised his sword high, its tip ablaze with golden flames. Imhotep, cradling Ansuna's body, began to dissolve into dust, bit by bit. Within the crypt, as he transformed, a massive sandstorm gradually formed. Winds howled, dust filled the air, a scene reminiscent of the end of the world. This was Imhotep's life or death blow. Perhaps it was his last chance. Even if he couldn't kill him, he would inflict a severe wound, securing a shred of dignity for himself and his beloved. However, O'Connor simply opened his palm, his control complete. As if summoned by a mysterious force, the sand gathered in his palm, gradually forming a small ball. Then, with a gentle squeeze, this seemingly casual movement held immense power, instantly negating Imhotep's attack. Imhotep clung to Ansuna tightly. This final blow had sapped all his strength, leaving him like a skeleton, emaciated and lifeless. Accept the final judgment, sinner. O'Connor's voice was cold and commanding, and his sword thrust out with lightning-fast force, its impact unparalleled. No one can judge me. As the words fell, the bodies of Imhotep and Ansuna turned into yellow sand and disappeared in the breeze. The long sword pierced the air, and O'Connor's face remained expressionless, but Weiss could clearly sense the anger in his heart, a kind of anger after being provoked. O'Connor turned his gaze to Weiss. It's coming. A strong sense of crisis surged into Weiss's heart. He immediately mobilized all the magic power in his body, preparing to meet the impending attack. However, the reality caught him off guard. The golden flames burning on O'Connor's body actually dissipated, and the whole person immediately returned to normal. What's wrong with this? O'Connor had no memory of what had just happened. He just felt very weak, as if all the strength in his body had been drained, and he fell to the ground. Chapter 84 New Trouble. The god's descent ended just like that? Was it depleted of energy? Wes didn't know the specifics. He desperately wanted to examine O'Connor's body, to see if there were any unusual changes. But Evelyn and Jonathan blocked his path, preventing him from approaching. Their eyes were filled with hostility, and they already considered Wes an enemy. Desperate, Wes cast a spell to freeze them in place. O'Connor struggled to stand, but he was too weak, and every movement seemed labored. Wes quickly approached him and carefully examined him, but found no obvious abnormalities. Finally, Wes pulled a potion from his sleeve and handed it to O'Connor. "Drink this, it will help you regain your strength." Then, in a flash of magical light, he vanished. Wes had witnessed the 10 plagues and the god's descent, and obtained the Black Book of the Dead and the Golden Book of the Sun, but the outcome of his battle with the he had left him dissatisfied. The feeling of having started well but ended poorly was like a thorn in his heart, causing him to feel annoyed. However, upon returning to Hogwarts, he received even more disturbing news. Peter Pettigrew ran away. Weiss was speechless upon hearing the news. Dumbledore nodded helplessly. According to the escorting orders, he controlled the rats to cause a riot and found an opportunity to escape. Did they drink fake wine? Weiss was extremely disappointed with the incompetence of the Ministry of Magic. He could get away like this. Dumbledore handed Weiss a cup of black tea, trying to ease his mood. Because of the World Cup, the Ministry of Magic has withdrawn a large number of elite personnel, so they are not particularly concerned about the escort of Pettigrew. Fudge was also furious about this, and many people in the Ministry of Magic began to be dissatisfied with him. Weiss took the teacup and took a sip, but he had no interest in these political matters. Weren't there any marks left on Peter Pettigrew that could be tracked? Dumbledore shrugged. Unfortunately, no. We considered it, but finally decided to respect legal procedures. Weiss sighed and shook his head. What a crap. Just as Weiss was sighing, a silver white ball emerged from his cuff, flashing with light. These were a pair of communication tools Weiss had crafted. The other was with Lucius Malfoy. Lucius must have contacted him about something urgent. "You handle the Ministry of Magic matters. I'm here to work," Weiss said to Dumbledore. "Do you need my help?" Dumbledore added 3 more spoonfuls of honey to Weiss's tea. Weiss looked at the cup with disdain, but didn't take a sip. "I'll let you know when I need you." He turned and left the office. The tranquility of Hogwarts seemed to have left him, replaced by endless troubles. Hogsmeade, the 3 broomsticks. Weiss didn't know why these people always came here to discuss matters. Perhaps it was because the crowds made it harder to be eavesdropped? Perhaps the atmosphere was more conducive to keeping secrets secret. Weiss reached the corner of the hall where Lucius was already waiting. However, he was completely cloaked in a black cloak, revealing only his eyes, and even his hands were covered in black gloves. "You're here," Lucius began, his voice altered by some magical artifact, becoming deep and husky. Weiss wasn't surprised. After all, being undercover was a dangerous undertaking. As for whether Lucius's attire would draw attention, the bar was full of people dressed even more strangely than Lucius. In a place like this, Lucius's outfit seemed ordinary. Weiss sat down and cast a soundproofing charm. "Talk without worry, no one can hear our conversation." Lucius's tense body relaxed, and he took a deep breath, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. "They found me, the Death Eaters." Weiss raised an eyebrow. "Why did they want you?" Despite the soundproofing charm, Lucius lowered his voice. "The dark mark is becoming increasingly visible. They suspect you know who's about to return. To avoid being targeted by you-know-who, they're trying to prove their loyalty. When Voldemort fell, aside from a few diehards imprisoned in Azkaban, most Death Eaters avoided imprisonment through various means. Among them was Lucius, who claimed he followed Voldemort under the influence of the Imperious Curse and, with the influence of his pure-blood family, escaped punishment. This was seen as betrayal by Voldemort and his diehard followers. Now that the Dark Mark had reappeared, these people began to panic again, fearing a reckoning. They planned to cause a riot at the World Cup to prove their loyalty, Lucius said in a low voice. Weiss was speechless. These Death Eaters were simply fence-sitters. "Are there any of these people I can win over?" Lucius leaned back, nearly falling. He knew Weiss meant for him to recruit a few. He refused without hesitation. "Don't even think about it. It's too dangerous." Weiss understood Lucius's concerns. "Cooperate with them, don't reveal your weaknesses, and tell me the time and location of their attack." Lucius breathed a sigh of relief. As long as he wasn't forced to do it himself, it would be fine. They planned to create chaos during the World Cup and use the crowds as cover to launch an attack. I'll tell you the exact time and location as soon as possible. Weiss noticed Lucius's uneasiness and reassured him, "Don't worry, we won't be caught. We'll make all the arrangements." "I hope so." Lucius downed a full glass of wine, suppressing his inner unease. He surveyed his surroundings, finding nothing unusual before he stood up and left. A few minutes later, a scarab beetle crawled onto the table and moved rhythmically across it. No one's following Lucius. It looks like he's safe for now. After confirming that Lucius wasn't being followed, Weiss returned to Hogwarts and went straight to Dumbledore's office to discuss countermeasures. "Things have been really turbulent lately," Dumbledore sighed, stroking his silver beard. Weiss interrupted him, "We already knew their plan in advance. They can't cause any trouble. The important thing is to do it naturally, so the Death Eaters don't notice the presence of the mole." "That's indeed a problem." Dumbledore tapped his index finger on the desk. Damn, the dull sound echoed through the office. "I got it." Dumbledore suddenly had an idea and took out a piece of letter paper and began to write something. Chapter 85 Undercurrent. After finishing, Dumbledore gracefully handed the letter to Fawkes, the Phoenix. Fawkes fluttered its magnificent wings, apparating and vanishing in the blink of an eye. "Will it reveal Lucius's identity?" Weiss blurted out, a touch of worry. "I didn't say anything in the letter. I just sent a ticket to the World Cup." "Ticket?" Weiss frowned slightly, puzzled by Dumbledore's reasoning. It seemed a bit puzzling to him. "My friend is a brilliant orator. The Death Eaters attacked because they found a loophole in the World Cup security. My friend, with a single glance at the scene, was able to identify the loophole and take appropriate measures." Dumbledore had great trust in his friend. The British Ministry of Magic had devoted considerable time and energy to the preparations for this Quidditch World Cup. They had devoted countless hours and energy, meticulously preparing for months just to protect against Muggles. During this time, Ministry officials busily formulated various plans and arranged various measures. Not only were dedicated apparition points set up to facilitate quick access to the stadium, but 200 portkeys were also distributed throughout the UK to serve the over 100,000 wizarding fans who traveled from around the world. These portkeys were cleverly hidden in various corners, disguised as trash and discarded clothing to avoid being triggered by Muggles. When Weiss paraded outside the stadium, it was already thronged with a surging crowd. An endless expanse of tents, a sea of color, had been erected by fans who had spent considerable time there. Countless fans had gathered from far and wide, filling the stadium with fans who had come to watch the match. The crowd seemed endless, and the stadium was filled with a bustling atmosphere. Some wizards soared through the air on their broomsticks, cheering excitedly and showing off their flying skills. However, to avoid detection by Muggles, Ministry of Magic officials had to scramble through the crowd to confiscate their brooms. Some wizards argued passionately over their favorite teams, even drawing their wands in excitement. Fortunately, Ministry officials intervened promptly to prevent these clashes from escalating into an international conflict. The Ministry's entire staff was swamped with work to organize this spectacular event, rushing to every corner to ensure the smooth running of the matches. Weiss had only just arrived when he witnessed Ministry officials for 3 incidents. Some were fan arguments, others minor incidents. The Ministry's officials felt overwhelmed by the sheer volume of conflict. Weiss suddenly understood the Ministry's predicament. Faced with a crush of people, he could only inch forward, struggling to find the spot Lucius had mentioned. This was where the Death Eaters had raided. It was a good choice, I must say. With everyone's attention focused on the World Cup, no one was paying attention. "Professor, are you coming to the World Cup too?" The call interrupted Wes's musings. His eyes scanned the crowd, finally settling on Fred and George. "What are you doing?" His gaze flickered between the twins, noticing the boxes they held and the floating magical fireworks advertising slogan. Atop the boxes floated the slogan, composed of magical fireworks, Twin Brothers Fireworks, everyone who's used it says it's great. The slogan flashed with colorful lights, drawing the attention of those around them. "As you can see." Fred patted the box gently, as if showing off his treasure. "We're accumulating funds," George added excitedly. They'd been diligent in alchemy, devoting considerable time and energy to its study. With Wes's guidance, the brothers had made rapid progress, now producing quality, reliable magical products. "We wanted to open a joke shop selling pranks," Fred said. "But Mom wouldn't support it." George shrugged helplessly. his gestures a bit exaggerated and evocative. "We'll just have to make some fireworks to sell here," Fred said with a hint of frustration, his eyes drooping slightly, as if he felt lost at the thwarting of his dreams. It must be said that Fred and George truly had business acumen. They saw an opportunity and used their alchemical skills to create exquisite magical fireworks. In less than an hour, they had earned dozens of gold galleons, more than their father's monthly salary. "Give me some to try," Wes said, holding out 10 gold galleons. "As a token of your support for your business venture." "That's too much," Fred waved away, having not expected such a large sum. "The rest of the fireworks aren't worth that much." "Really, Professor, these aren't worth that much?" George quickly declined. Wes ignored them and went about selecting a few different fireworks to try. The fireworks exploded in the sky, a dazzling display of color, attracting the attention of many of the surrounding children. The children cheered excitedly under the exploding fireworks, and Wes shared the remaining fireworks among them. "Very good. Magic fireworks are also a type of magical prop. You've already mastered the art of making alchemical props independently," Weiss's praise delighted the twins, their faces beaming with pride. "If only Mom supported us like you do. She prefers nerds like Percy. She wants us to get respectable jobs like Dad, but that's too boring," the twins couldn't help but complain to Weiss. "I think Molly would support you," Weiss consoled them, but he had other things to attend to and quickly dismissed the twins. By then, the twins had nearly 100 gold galleons in hand, and they were eager to use their achievements to convince their mother to support their cause, or at least stop hindering them. As the sky darkened, Weiss followed the crowd into the stadium, trying not to attract attention. Unexpectedly, Dumbledore had given him a VIP ticket, so he could only go to the top-level box, which was mostly occupied by high-ranking ministry officials. Minister for Magic Cornelius Fudge, Director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation Barty Crouch, and officials from various departments were present. They were dressed in gorgeous robes that showed their status and power. There were also many pure-blood families who came to watch the game, such as the Malfoys. Chapter 86 Little Karami. Wes and Lucius didn't speak to each other. They pretended to be strangers, their eyes occasionally meeting, but they kept their distance. The most eye-catching thing in the box was the Wheel Eyes, Harry, and Hermione, all 10 of them gathered together. Arthur Weasley's face lit up with a bright smile as he spotted Wes, and he greeted him warmly. "Wes. What a coincidence. Are you coming to the game too?" Wes smiled and nodded. "Yes, Arthur, it's nice to see you." Arthur pulled Wes over to sit next to them and began to recount his visit to Harry's aunt's. "You know, Harry's aunt wasn't very kind to him. Our visit to pick him up was truly eye-opening. Those muggles knew nothing about the magical world and treated Harry like a freak." By nightfall, the stands were packed. Wes thought there were more than 100,000 people. Supporters of the Bulgarian and Irish teams stood distinctly on opposite sides, wearing their respective team colors, face paint, and waving flags and banners. Before the match even began, fans from both teams were already engaged in a fierce battle, their chants and cheers growing louder and louder, determined to outdo each other. As night fell, the stadium lights gradually came on, illuminating the entire venue like daylight. Suddenly, melodious music blared, drawing everyone's attention to the entrance. The Bulgarian team's mascots, the Maya girls, arrived. They are incredibly beautiful, seductive humanoids with graceful figures and stunning features. Dressed in gorgeous long dresses, they danced gracefully, their skirts swaying with each step, their every move captivating. Their entrance captivated everyone, especially the men. The stadium, previously bustling with activity, suddenly fell silent as the Maya girls danced gracefully in the center of the field, captivating the audience. Just as the Maya girls were about to conclude their performance, another burst of cheers and laughter shattered the stillness. The Irish team's mascots, the leprechauns, arrived. These small, yet incredibly lively and adorable leprechauns, arrived. As they entered the arena, they frantically tossed gold coins into the crowd. These coins were magically conjured and would vanish after a short while. As they tossed the coins, the leprechauns tumbled and leaped through the air, performing a variety of antics that drew roars of laughter from the crowd. The atmosphere in the stadium reached a fever pitch as the two teams' mascots took the stage. Immediately afterwards, players from both teams emerged from the tunnel on their broomsticks. The fans erupted in the loudest cheers and roars yet. The loudest cheers went to Victor Krum, seeker of the Bulgarian national Quidditch team. He had a huge following worldwide, and most neutral fans came to witness his impressive flying skills. The match soon began. The players engaged in a fierce battle in the air, each brilliant pass, catch, and goal drawing roars of applause. At that moment, Weiss's attention wasn't focused on the exciting game. His eyes flickered around him, wary of the Death Eater's imminent attack. Aside from Weiss and Lucius, everyone else in the box was completely absorbed in the action. Dumbledore, Minister Fudge, and other high-ranking ministry officials were all excitedly discussing the highlights of the match. The moment Krum caught the golden snitch, the match was over. Although Bulgaria had lost, Krum's performance had earned him applause from the crowd. Countless fireworks burst from the sky, illuminating the night sky with a dazzling display of color. Countless gold coins rained down from the sky, and the entire stadium erupted in jubilation, celebrating the end of this grand occasion. However, amid the deafening cheers and explosions, Weiss heard something different, a sound he immediately recognized as the Death Eater's signal to move. He quietly left the box, unnoticed by anyone but Lucius. Weiss made his way through the throng, hurrying towards the source of the noise. When he arrived, a man with gray hair and a scarred face was being attacked by a dozen Death Eaters. The man was missing a large chunk of flesh from his nose, had a prosthetic eye, and a prosthetic leg. Not only would children cry at this sight, even adults would be terrified by the sight of such a figure. However, this person was Mad-Eye Moody, a member of the Order of the Phoenix and former Order. A brave warrior who had once stood on the front lines against Voldemort, he had personally captured many of the criminals and Death Eaters in Azkaban. Even now, facing a siege from a dozen Death Eaters, he still managed to find time to fight back, a testament to his strength. Weiss, observing this, immediately took action. Fire, the surrounding objects transformed into projectiles, hurling them towards the Death Eaters. The Death Eaters, completely focused on Moody, had not anticipated this new threat. Weiss's sudden attack caught them off guard, piercing several Death Eaters and killing them instantly. Before they could react, Weiss cast another spell, Flame. A long, fiery snake formed and hurled itself at the Death Eaters. After the snake devoured several Death Eaters, the remaining Death Eaters finally realized, but it was too late. However, the Death Eaters didn't prepare to retaliate, but instead quickly paraded away, even taking their injured companions with them. Weiss hadn't expected such cowardice from these Death Eaters. The commotion had attracted considerable attention, and several auras were hurrying over. Weiss, not wanting to be seen participating in the situation, nodded to Moody and paraded away. It was up to Moody to explain himself. After all, he had been in Aura for most of his life, a figurehead within the ministry whose words carried weight. Weiss, a non-staff member, might face questioning if he stayed. He feigned indifference as he returned to the box. Ministry officials had just received word of the attack, and Cornelius Fudge, after a few polite words, hurriedly left with the officials. "Professor, where have you been?" the twin brothers, Fred and George, asked, their faces beaming. "You missed the awards ceremony." The twins had accurately predicted the outcome of the match and staked their entire bankroll with Ludo Bachman, the head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports. This provided enough startup capital for the joke shop. Just as Weiss was about to speak, a sudden, loud explosion shattered the tranquility of the night sky. Bang! A massive arc mark erupted in the sky, looming over the field. Everyone looked up to see the terrifying symbol. Chapter 87. Why did the professor change again? That's it, someone cried in terror. You know who? You know who has returned? A panic cry erupted from the crowd. Rumors circulated throughout the wizarding world, one of which was that Voldemort was not dead and would eventually return. The stadium erupted like hot oil being doused with cold water. People kept pushing to the outside, pushing over half the crowd. Some pulled out their brooms, others followed suit, until the air and the ground were packed with people. The host tried to calm everyone, but no one listened. 100,000 wizards, all sorts of people, were mingling, and some took advantage of the situation to loot, steal, and even commit mischief, further escalating the chaos. The source of all this was a single dark mark in the sky. The fear of Voldemort had become ingrained in the European wizarding community. When Weiss returned to Hogwarts, Dumbledore had been waiting in the headmaster's office for a long time. A faint fragrance filled the room, and the flickering flames of the fireplace reflected on Dumbledore's silver beard. What, just a bunch of ragtag gangs? Weiss shrugged. I killed a few Death Eaters, and the rest, seeing things were going badly, all ran away. Moody stayed behind to clean up the mess, and then someone cast the dark mark, causing the commotion. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. Do you know who it was? Weiss reviewed the scene and didn't see anyone suspicious. It couldn't be those Death Eaters. However, in the novel, it was Barty Crouch Jr. who took advantage of the situation and cast the dark mark. Thinking of this, he reminded Dumbledore, the Death Eaters won't let Moody go this time. Dumbledore nodded. Moody has always been very suspicious, and he trusts very few people. The person who cast the dark mark also needs attention. They weren't on the list Lucius provided. Weiss's words left Dumbledore silent. The appearance of this mysterious person was indeed a thorny issue. Azkaban isn't impenetrable. Did it serious escape from it just last year? Dumbledore raised his head and looked Weiss straight in the eye. Are you saying a Death Eater escaped? Weiss didn't answer Dumbledore's question directly. You have many connections at the Ministry. Just check and you'll know. With that, he turned and left. Dumbledore watched him thoughtfully. Weiss didn't care about Dumbledore's next plans. With his warning, if Barty Crouch Jr. could still sneak into Hogwarts, then Dumbledore would be truly senile. The appearance of the dark mark at the Quidditch World Cup didn't make the newspapers, apparently suppressed by the Ministry. But with so many witnesses, rumors spread throughout the wizarding world. A grand event for the wizarding world was completely ruined by a mere dark mark. Cornelius Fudge's position as minister was in jeopardy, and the Ministry was in turmoil. Fortunately, Hogwarts was unaffected and classes resumed as scheduled. However, the students' discussions revolved around the Quidditch World Cup, and few paid much attention to the sorting ceremony, their minds preoccupied with the event. When Dumbledore announced that the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor would be Alastor Moody, the entire hall fell silent. Not a single young wizard applauded. Everyone was frightened by Moody's terrifying appearance, and even some professors kept their distance. Weiss stared at Moody, lost in thought. I wonder if he was the real Moody, or someone in disguise. Everyone in the hall, caught in Moody's prosthetic eye's gaze, involuntarily lowered their heads, afraid to meet his gaze. The scene was momentarily awkward. Classmates, Dumbledore's voice echoed through the hall. Please welcome our new professor, Alastor Moody. Moody stood beside Dumbledore, his presence truly chilling. I know my appearance may frighten you, Moody said in a deep, powerful voice. But you need to know that defense against the dark arts is no easy course. Here, you will learn how to protect yourself and how to face the forces of darkness. Weiss observed Moody, trying to find flaws in his words and actions. He knew that Barty Crouch Jr. might use this opportunity to infiltrate Hogwarts, and Moody would be a perfect target. But if this person was indeed Moody, his presence would undoubtedly greatly enhance the school's defenses. When Moody finished his speech, a silence fell, and only after Dumbledore led the applause did the hall begin to break into applause. Moody might be one of the most unpopular professors in Hogwarts history, but Moody himself didn't seem to care. He plopped down next to Weiss. If you hadn't warned me, I'd have been ambushed by the Death Eaters, and last time, thankfully Dumbledore showed up just in time and scared them off. I probably would have lost my life. You're welcome. You're very capable. Dumbledore speaks highly of you. The two of them spoke quietly in the professorial chair, and Weiss finally confirmed that this Moody was the real thing, not some imposter. The students' voices grew louder, interrupting their conversation. Really, Headmaster, the twins, Fred and George, shouted. You're kidding, aren't you? Dumbledore, distracted by the twins' words, said, since we're talking about jokes, I remember a really funny one. One day, a troll, a hag, and a leprechaun walked into a pub together. Seeing Dumbledore digress, Professor McGonagall cleared her throat, trying to get him back on track. However, Dumbledore didn't seem to hear, and Professor McGonagall, helpless, tapped her glass with a spoon. Dumbledore regained his composure and turned to the entire student body. Excuse me, students, but I have a very important announcement to make. He glanced around to ensure everyone was paying attention, then continued, this year, Hogwarts will be hosting a very special tournament, the Triwizard Tournament. The students erupted in excitement, chattering. The Muggle-born students, though unaware of the event, joined in the celebrations after hearing that this was a century-old event. Dumbledore then announced that all Quidditch matches for the year would be cancelled in preparation for the Triwizard Tournament. This disappointed the students, but they quickly forgot about the greater celebrations that awaited them. Chapter 88 Prologue 1. The Ministry officials are full of shit. Moody lashed out like a raging young man, lashing out at the Ministry. They should be searching for the Death Eaters now. Those people are just trying to keep their jobs. Moody was delighted that Weiss agreed with him and took a liking to him. Although Moody's magical powers weren't as profound as Weiss's, he had considerable combat experience and shared many useful techniques. You can't be soft-hearted with dark wizards. They won't give you a second chance. Moody had a deep understanding of the dark arts and wasn't shy about using them. According to Moody, only those who were more cruel, more despicable, and more knowledgeable than those dark wizards could be subdued. When the new semester began, the students were most worried about defense against the dark arts. Everyone had heard of Mad-Eye Moody and worried that he would cast unforgivable curses on the students, just as he had on the Death Eaters. What the students didn't know was that, despite his harshness, Moody was very measured and would never physically assault the students. The previous defense against the dark arts teacher was too gentle, Moody said during a conversation with Weiss. We need to make sure our students truly understand the dangers of the dark forces. He was very pleased with the combat exercises Weiss had arranged and decided to keep them. Moody's lessons were much more rigorous than Professor Lupin's, and the young wizards complained bitterly, especially the Slytherin students. Most of the criminals Moody apprehended were from Slytherin House, and some of these children had relatives or parents imprisoned in Azkaban by him. Having grown up hearing about his deeds, these children feared and hated him. If you grow up to be like your parents, I will throw you into Azkaban to reunite with them. Moody's words frightened several children to tears, giving the students of the other three houses a good laugh. Time passed quickly, and it was already October. On this day, all teachers and students took a day off to welcome the guests from afar, the students and headmasters of Durmstrang and Volksbüttens. Representatives from Volksbüttens and Durmstrang schools of wizardry would arrive at Hogwarts that day. Although the average temperature in the UK in October is around 6 to 16 degrees Celsius, it was overcast and rainy today. Students, sheltering under their raincoats, were already complaining about the inclement weather. The sound of wings flapping against the air echoed from the sky, and the eagle-eyed student spotted the enormous flying carriage, a virtual moving villa, gleaming with golden light and adorned with ornate patterns. It was pulled by 8 rune horses, whose size and strength far surpassed those of ordinary horses, endowing them with immense strength and endurance. Amidst the shimmer of music and magical light, the enormous flying carriage slowly descended upon the grounds of Hogwarts. The door opened, and a woman emerged. She was tall, even a head taller than Hagrid, and exuded a commanding presence that was truly impressive. This woman was Madame Olympe Maxime, headmistress of Volksbüttens School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Following behind her were the students of Volksbüttens School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. These students, clearly meticulously dressed in exquisite silk robes, gracefully stepped out of the carriage, exuding a sense of elegance and grace. One girl in particular captured the attention of most students. She had long silver hair, deep, piercing blue eyes, and a delicate face, reminiscent of a fairy tale princess. This girl was Fleur Delacour, and she stood out from the crowd. The Hogwarts students cast envious glances at her, especially the boys, who were captivated by her beauty. Wow, the Volksbüttens students are truly beautiful. Dumbledore and Madame Maxime were exchanging pleasantries when a deep, rumbling sound suddenly echoed from the sky. The Hogwarts students looked up to see a massive black ship slowly rising from the lake, a truly spectacular sight. It docked at the shore, and Igor Karkaroff, along with the Durmstrang students, clad in fur cloaks and blood-red robes, disembarked with a menacing presence. Viktor Krum, seeker for the Bulgarian national Quidditch team, stood beside Karkaroff, his presence immediately causing quite a stir. Merlin's beard? It's Krum. Krum had showcased his prowess at the recently concluded Quidditch World Cup, becoming an idol to countless fans. Now, he'd arrived at Hogwarts as a student at Durmstrang, sending the entire campus into a frenzy. Long time no see, Dumbledore, Karkaroff said, hugging Dumbledore before proudly introducing Krum. This is Viktor Krum, the world's greatest seeker and our school's champion. Krum, modest and unlike Karkaroff's flamboyance, nodded slightly and greeted Dumbledore. Dumbledore smiled and replied, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Krum. Your performance was truly impressive." Dumbledore welcomed the guests into the Great Hall, where the warmth prompted everyone to remove their raincoats. The house elves had already prepared a sumptuous dinner, featuring French and Nordic cuisine for the guests' welcome. The Great Hall was filled with enticing aromas, and students gathered around long tables, savoring cuisine from a variety of countries. Midway through the banquet, Dumbledore stood up, tapped his cup, and signaled silence. "Dear students," Dumbledore's voice echoed through the hall, Today, we not only welcome our friends from Boxburtons and Durmstrang, but we are also about to embark on a momentous ceremony, the unveiling of the Goblet of Fire, witnessed by the assembled audience. Dumbledore, Madame Maxime, and Headmaster Karkaroff stepped onto the podium and unveiled a black cloth covering the Goblet of Fire. The Goblet of Fire looked like a worn wooden cup, unremarkable in its appearance, yet it held the highest honor a student in any European wizarding school could achieve. Dumbledore explained, "This Goblet of Fire will select the champions of the Triwizard Tournament. Any student aged 17 or over may place their name in the goblet. Tomorrow evening, the goblet will select a champion from each school to compete in the following tournament." The hall erupted in chatter as students began planning their registrations, excitedly discussing their chance to shine. To prevent younger students from voting, Dumbledore drew a line on the ground. "This is the age limit. Students under 17 cannot cross this line." Some younger students had already begun to plot how to circumvent Dumbledore's magic. Dumbledore knew what the students were thinking, but he didn't intend to interfere. If even students could break his magic, he wouldn't be worthy of being called the greatest white wizard. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89 Prologue 2. During registration, a long line formed in front of the Goblet of Fire. Even a few Hogwarts first years joined the queue, and no one pushed them out. So far, no one had managed to cross the age limit set by Dumbledore. The Great Hall was filled with tension, as students debated who would become the champion and how to cross that seemingly insurmountable line. Soon, it was the turn of the twin brothers, Fred and George. They pulled a bottle of brewed aging potion from their pockets and gulped it down, like a wedding toast. The onlookers watched with bated breath. The twins, beaming with triumph, strode towards the age line marked by Dumbledore. To everyone's astonishment, they successfully crossed the line. "Wow, go Fred, George, well done, you're champions." The cheers from all around filled the twins with pride, like victorious generals. They swaggered towards the Goblet of Fire, ready to insert their names into it. Bang! With a loud bang, the twins were flung beyond the age limit and fell heavily to the ground. The onlookers sighed, and some couldn't help laughing. Fred and George scrambled to their feet, dusting themselves off. The Great Hall erupted in laughter again. The age limit had taken its toll on the twins, their hair and eyebrows turning silver white, and long beards sprouting from their chins. They exchanged a stunned glance, then pointed at each other and burst into laughter, collapsing on the ground. "I think Madame Pomfrey can help you return to normal," Dumbledore said from the top of the stairs, a smile in his eyes. "No need, Headmaster," Fred gasped. "Those long beards are so cool," George chimed in. "Yeah, we like them that way." The twins imitated Dumbledore, stroking their own long beards with a look of pride. "Your beards are indeed very beautiful," Dumbledore said, even feeling a little jealous. In less than half a day, Hogwarts was filled with a horde of elderly men with white hair and youthful faces. These young wizards had purchased aging potions from the twins in an attempt to break the age limit, but unsurprisingly, they all failed. However, none of them went to the infirmary to see Madame Pomfrey, believing the backlash would be harmless and only last a few days. Even more interesting, they held a competition to see who had the longest and most beautiful beard. Far from being discouraged, the twins actually made a small profit from it. A few days later, when the winners of the Triwizard Tournament were announced, the Great Hall at Hogwarts was packed. Every student was filled with anticipation, hoping to be chosen. Dumbledore, as the oldest, presided over the ceremony, and Barty Crouch attended as a representative from the Ministry of Magic. He stood beside Dumbledore, his expression solemn, as he surveyed the audience. Dumbledore raised his hands, signaling for silence. "Now, let us witness the selection of the Goblet of Fire." The Goblet of Fire suddenly glowed brightly, and a ball of flame rose from it, enveloping a piece of paper. Dumbledore took the slip and announced loudly, "The champion representing Durmstrang School of Wizardry is Victor Crumb." Clap, 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 clap. Applause and cheers instantly resounded throughout the Great Hall. Crumb's selection as Durmstrang School was a popular choice. He had anticipated that no one else in the school would be worthy of competing against him. He calmly stood up, nodding with a confident smile. As the applause died down, Dumbledore took up the Goblet of Fire and spit out the second slip, The champion representing Boxburton's School of Wizardry is Fleur Delacour. The most striking girl among the Boxburton students stood up. This simple gesture captivated countless boys. Unlike Crumb, many of his fellow Boxburton students curled their lips in disdain when Fleur was chosen as the champion. She wasn't particularly popular at school. Dumbledore continued presiding over the ceremony, and the Goblet of Fire glowed once more. The champion representing Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is Cedric Diggory. The great hall erupted in its loudest cheers yet. No matter how powerful or famous Crumb was, or how beautiful Fleur was, they couldn't compare to Cedric being one of their own. Students flocked to congratulate him on becoming the representative of Hogwarts. The three champions became the center of attention, and everyone gathered around them, expressing their congratulations and anticipation. Bang! Another note flew out of the Goblet of Fire. Everyone was stunned, even Dumbledore, momentarily unable to react, holding the note motionless. Seeing everyone staring at him, Dumbledore slowly unfolded the note and read the name, Harry Potter. A momentary silence fell over the Great Hall, followed by an uproar. Harry Potter, a mere 14-year-old, had been chosen by the Goblet of Fire as the fourth champion. Now, everyone's attention was on Harry Potter. Harry froze in place, unsure of what to do. Only when Hermione nudged him did he realize he had been chosen. The Triwizard Tournament had always had only 3 champions, but now there was one more, something no one had anticipated. The Great Hall erupted in chaos, with students from Boxburton's and Durmstrang schools accusing Hogwarts of cheating. Madame Maxime and Karkaroff's expressions grew serious. Dumbledore stepped in to calm the situation, sending Professor McGonagall and Harry away. Please be quiet. We will expedite the investigation and ensure the fairness of the tournament. After calming the students, Dumbledore quickly summoned the 3 headmasters, Barty Crouch, and the professors to discuss the unforeseen situation. Madame Maxime was the most incensed, questioning the fairness of the tournament. This is patently unfair. The Goblet of Fire shouldn't have chosen a 4th champion. To Weiss's surprise, Karkaroff didn't raise these doubts, as he did in the book. Instead, he actively encouraged Harry to participate. The Goblet of Fire's choice has its reasons, Karkaroff said. We cannot easily deny its decision. Moreover, since 4 champions have been chosen, we should respect the result. This made Weiss look at him a few more times. Karkaroff's attitude was very different from that in the original book, and Weiss began to doubt his true intentions. Barty Crouch believed that the Goblet of Fire would not make a mistake. The Goblet of Fire is an ancient magical item. It would not make such a choice for no reason. According to tradition, the chosen person must participate in the competition. After some discussion, the 3 headmasters finally reached a consensus and decided to accept the choice of the Goblet of Fire. After many years, the Triwizard Tournament was held again, but it ushered in an unprecedented 4th champion. The story of Harry Potter will end in the next few days. The protagonist will go to a new world. And the story of Harry Potter needs to be completed before going to the new world. Chapter 90 Conspiracy. In the headmaster's office, Weiss and Moody sat across from Dumbledore's desk. 3 steaming cups of tea sat on the table, but no one was sipping. A tense atmosphere hung in the air. Moody's blue prosthetic eye swiveled, as if searching for a hidden clue. His deep voice broke the silence. Unnatural, utterly unnatural, Dumbledore said, his head resting on his left hand, his brow furrowed. Harry doesn't have the ability to enter his name into the Goblet of Fire. Yes, Harry was surprised to be chosen, too. He couldn't fool my eyes. Moody was incredibly confident in his observation skills. He wouldn't believe a student's lies could fool him. Weiss, observing the two racking their brains, decided to offer some advice. Professors wouldn't do such a frivolous thing. If the students had the ability, why would they write Harry's name, eliminate all impossibilities, and only one possibility remains? Someone has a compelling reason for Harry to enter the competition. Who could it be? Moody trembled, his prosthetic eye swiveling. Dumbledore fell into deep thought, his gaze gazing out the window into the distance. The room was so quiet that only the ticking of the clock could be heard. Dumbledore seemed to have a thought, and he retracted his gaze, looking back at Weiss and Moody before him. While participating in the Triwizard Tournament is an honor, it's also dangerous. Therefore, the person who put Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire couldn't have been Harry's friend, Death Eaters. Moody slammed his cane into the floor. They've been very active since the Quidditch World Cup, and they even attacked me. Now that I think about it, your attack is quite strange. They haven't sought revenge on you in all these years, So why would they attack you this year? Weiss added. Dumbledore and Moody were both intelligent men, and with a little guidance from Weiss, they quickly deduced the Death Eater's plan. Moody couldn't quite wrap his head around one point, and he raised a question. The Goblet of Fire? Their goal is to get Harry to touch it, but what good would that do? Dumbledore suddenly stood up. A portkey? They can make the Goblet of Fire into a portkey, and that way they can transport Harry out of Hogwarts and out of my sight. Moody leaped to his feet, ready to leave the office. Wait a minute, Weiss stopped him. What are you waiting for? There's a problem with the Goblet of Fire. We must stop the game. Moody's voice was filled with anxiety. And then what? Of course, find that damn Death Eater and put him in Azkaban. Moody gnashed his teeth in hatred at the mention of Death Eaters. And then what? Faced with Weiss's follow-up questions, Moody was momentarily unsure how to respond. Catching one Death Eater won't solve the fundamental problem. They'll have countless opportunities to attack Harry. Weiss knocked on the table. Why don't we take advantage of their advantage, you mean? Moody became interested, and Dumbledore sat back in his comfortable office chair. Moody, in particular, was eager to know what Weiss was going to do next. Weiss looked up and motioned for Moody to sit down first. I remember the Goblet of Fire only appears in the final match, right? Yes, the first contestant to find the trophy wins. Weiss continued, that means the students are safe before then, and the Death Eaters won't dare to act in Hogwarts. At this point, Dumbledore and Moody had already reacted. The Death Eaters went to such great lengths to teleport Harry away. It must be for a greater cause. Perhaps it was Voldemort who orchestrated it, he said, picking up a cup of tea, blowing gently on it before taking a sip. We just need to follow Harry and we'll discover their plan. Dumbledore, this is a great opportunity. Moody excitedly slammed the table, his cane thumping against the ground with a dull thud. Even if Voldemort didn't orchestrate it himself, capturing a few more Death Eaters could force him to reveal his whereabouts. Dumbledore was impressed by the plan, but he remained hesitant. We can craft a portkey and place it on Harry. As soon as he disappears, we'll follow him. With you, Moody, and me here, even Voldemort in his prime will be defeated. Weiss's words made Dumbledore determined. He stood up, walked to the window, and gazed out at the school in the night. That's it, but we have to protect the children, of course, Weiss said seriously. After all, as a Hogwarts professor, he wouldn't risk the children's safety. To be on the safe side, I think we can make two plans. Cedric's also a student at Hogwarts. You don't want anything to happen to him, do you? What about Fleur and Crumb? Moody asked worriedly, gripping his cane tightly. Do we need to tell the other two schools? I don't trust that Karkaroff kid. He's a former Death Eater. No need to tell anyone else. The Death Eaters are targeting Harry, and they don't want to cause any trouble. I'll ask Severus to get information about Karkaroff. Dumbledore agreed with Weiss. We just need to make sure Harry or Cedric touches the Goblet of Fire first. The Death Eaters are the same, and we're in the dark right now, Moody calculated. With the right preparations, this plan was practically foolproof. Moody, I'll leave Harry in your care. At least give him enough strength to protect himself until we get there. Dumbledore looked at Moody with trust. No problem, I'll ensure Harry's safety. Leave Cedric to me, Weiss volunteered. Dumbledore was slightly taken aback. He hadn't expected Wes to be so proactive this time. Wes simply wanted to eliminate Voldemort and the Death Eaters once and for all. Wes was tired of these guys causing trouble every year. Knock, knock, knock. Cedric knocked on Wes's office door. Come in. Wes's voice came from behind the door. Hearing Wes's voice, Cedric straightened his clothes, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open and walked in. The office was softly lit, the bookshelves were filled with various magical books, and the air was filled with a faint scent of ink. Professor, Cedric greeted, then stood there, looking a little uneasy. He didn't know why Wes had called him here, and he was confused when he received the notice. Wes sat behind his desk, looking at Cedric gently. Please sit down, Cedric. He pointed to a chair across from him. The Harry Potter story will be concluded in a few days. The protagonist will go to a new world, and before going to the new world, the story of Harry Potter needs to be completed. Chapter 91 Secret Training. Cedric sat down as instructed, his hands resting on his knees, looking a little nervous. Cedric, what do you think of Harry being the fourth champion? Cedric pondered for a moment. Since the Goblet of Fire chose Harry, I think he's worthy of the competition. Perhaps there's something about him that made him the winner. It sounded a bit high-sounding, but it was Cedric's true thoughts. Most students were displeased with Harry's selection, but Cedric had his own judgment. He knew Harry's abilities simply couldn't overcome the age limit set by Dumbledore. As for who was helping Harry, Cedric didn't care. As long as the competition was fair, he feared no one. "There's something I need your cooperation on." Cedric's attention was immediately focused as Weiss began to describe their plan in detail, from the possibility of the Goblet of Fire being tampered with, to the possible involvement of Death Eaters, to how they planned to deal with it. Cedric was stunned. He had never expected Death Eaters to be involved in the Triwizard Tournament, and for a moment he couldn't accept the reality. "I thought they had all been caught and the you-know-who was dead. Why are you telling me this? Wouldn't it be better for your plan if you kept it from me?" Weiss smiled slightly, with a hint of admiration in his eyes. "You are a smart person, and you are much stronger than Harry. There is a high chance that you will be the first to touch the Goblet of Fire. The Death Eaters will not spare your life just because you are a child. You also know our plan, and we don't want you to be in danger. The Death Eaters are targeting Harry. If you can accept to withdraw from the competition." "No." Cedric clenched his hands. "I won't withdraw." Weiss shrugged, as if he had expected Cedric's reaction. "That's why we have to make sure you have the ability to protect yourself. Giving you special training for no reason will always arouse your suspicion. Cedric, you are not as easy to fool as Harry, so I am being honest with you. Think about it carefully, don't rush to give me an answer," Weiss said, handing him a glass of water. Cedric sat in the chair and thought for a long time, and finally made up his mind. "Professor, I am willing to cooperate with you. Are you sure? We can't guarantee your life safety 100%. This is not a joke. You will face the Death Eaters and fight with them." Weiss kindly reminded Cedric again that this is not a simple decision. He needs to think it over carefully. Cedric raised his wand and said confidently, "I am the brave man chosen by the Goblet of Fire. Since you have made a decision, then this matter must be kept secret." He patted Cedric on the shoulder. "Including you, only 4 people know about this plan." Cedric promised that he would never leak the plan, and even proposed to make a vow not to betray. Weiss smiled and shook his head, indicating that it was unnecessary. "I believe you, Cedric. It is enough that you understand the importance of this plan." Weiss could see that although Cedric kept a calm face, he was actually very nervous and excited. It would be strange if a 17-year-old kid didn't get excited when he suddenly knew so many secrets and played an extremely important role in them. "Get a good rest tonight. I will give you special training starting tomorrow. You are far from strong enough now to survive the Death Eaters." When he was a child, Weiss also fantasized about receiving a secret mission and turning the tide to become a hero. He knew this feeling. "Understood, Professor. I will do my best." After Cedric left the office, Wes returned to his desk and continued preparing his next plan. Starting the next day, Wes began rigorous training for Cedric. The training was simple, real combat, non-stop. In the Forbidden Forest, within the dark and humid Forbidden Forest, Wes's clones constantly appeared, forcing Cedric to dodge and counterattack in the complex terrain. At first, Cedric would be defeated by Wes's clones in less than 5 minutes. In the Black Lake, under the icy waters of the Black Lake, Cedric not only had to deal with underwater obstacles but also with Wes's clones. The training here greatly improved his endurance and reaction speed. In the mountains, amidst the rugged terrain, Cedric learned how to use the terrain for cover and attack. Day or night, Cedric had to remain vigilant, as Wes's clones could appear at any time. Wes had only one requirement for Cedric's training: successfully escape from his clones. At first, Cedric could only hold out for a few minutes, but over time, he gradually became able to hold out for longer periods. By the time the first match began, Cedric could last half an hour. To achieve this goal, he gave up all his free time, even cutting back on time with his girlfriend. He ended each day covered in wounds and bruises. Had it not been for Madame Pomfrey's medical skills, he would have collapsed long ago. Meanwhile, Harry was undergoing specialized training with Moody, whose methods were much more brutal than Weiss's, leaving Harry exhausted. Harry and Cedric met daily in the infirmary, and their frequent visits grew increasingly familiar. That night, the two, sharing a common affliction, lay in adjacent beds, receiving treatment from Madame Pomfrey. "Really? Even if you're chosen as a champion, you don't have to work so hard," Madame Pomfrey exasperated. Her frown deepened when she saw Harry's wounds. "No, I'm going to see Dumbledore." "Harry, you're still young. Such intense training will affect your growth. You don't want to be short, do you?" After Madame Pomfrey told the two to have a good rest, She hurried to the headmaster's office to complain. Harry and Cedric were left looking at each other, and the atmosphere was a little awkward for a moment. "Well," Harry began. "Well," Cedric spoke almost at the same time. The two looked at each other and said in unison, "You speak first." With a chuckle, the two couldn't help laughing. "I didn't expect that we have such a tacit understanding," Cedric shrugged and said with a smile. "You speak first." Harry nodded and decided to speak first. "The first match is against a dragon," he told the news he got from Hagrid. "I know it sounds crazy, but I'm sure it's true." Cedric was stunned at first, and then he laughed so hard that tears came out. Harry looked at his reaction, a little puzzled, and even worried that Cedric had some disease. He wondered whether he should call Madame Pomfrey back. Cedric wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes and explained, "That's what I wanted to say too. It seems that we really have a tacit understanding." Harry grinned, the tension in his heart instantly relieved a lot, and the two rivals felt a sense of mutual respect at this moment. Chapter 92 I'm Waiting for You. November had just arrived, and the first Triwizard Tournament was about to begin. The long-awaited Triwizard Tournament captivated countless audiences, not only the students and professors at Hogwarts, but also the Ministry of Magic. Barty Crouch, as the chief organizer, led the various departments of the ministry to work closely together to ensure the smooth running of the tournament. The ministry intended to use the success of the Triwizard Tournament to offset the defeat at the Quidditch World Cup, and therefore had high hopes for this event. The four champions underwent wand examinations and pre-match interviews, and the audience had grown increasingly impatient as they waited. Finally, to a round of enthusiastic applause, the tournament officially began. The first match was a duel against a dragon. Cedric's performance was far superior to that in the book, demonstrating that Weiss's extensive training had paid off. Using clever strategy and powerful magical skills, he successfully retrieved the golden egg from the dragon's lair, earning the audience's enthusiastic cheers. Harry's turn also saw him display remarkable courage and wisdom. Despite initial nervousness, Harry, trained by Moody, had already developed sufficient strength. Using his flying skills, he deftly dodged the dragon's attack and ultimately secured a golden egg. During the judging, Karkaroff surprisingly gave Harry a high score. This aroused Weiss's suspicions, suggesting that Karkaroff might have been replaced by Barty Crouch Jr. or under some threat. However, these speculations were irrelevant. The key was to ensure the safety of Harry and the other champions. Soon, the champions would face their final round. The Quidditch pitch had been transformed into the final match, with a massive maze towering in its center. Before the match, Weiss pulled Cedric aside and handed him two items. "This pocket watch will protect you from a fatal attack." As for this, Weiss handed Cedric a worn glove with disdain. "This was made by Dumbledore. If you are transported from Hogwarts, don't panic. Just a touch of magic will activate it, and will portkey you." Cedric solemnly accepted the two items and carefully hid them. As he was about to leave, Weiss stopped him. "Cedric, don't push yourself." "Harry, Professor, I'm the chosen one," Cedric smiled. "And didn't you say I'm stronger than an average adult wizard? Have faith in me." With that, Cedric left. With a whistle, the competition officially began. Harry, Cedric, Crumb, and Fleur entered the maze in the order of their performance in the first two rounds. The audience fell into a hush, everyone holding their breath. Weiss sat next to Dumbledore. Moody closed his eyes, gathering his strength, seemingly unconcerned with the competition. Only Dumbledore kept a close eye on the proceedings, his gaze fixed on the maze entrance. Inside the maze, the four champions each made their move. Crumb and Fleur quickly fell far behind, and anyone with a discerning eye could see they had lost their chance to compete for the championship. Now the competition was between Harry and Cedric, and the Triwizard Tournament had practically become a civil war within Hogwarts. As Harry and Cedric drew closer to the Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore grasped the Elder Wand, and Moody opened his eyes. The atmosphere in the audience grew tense, everyone awaiting the outcome. Finally, Harry and Cedric saw the Goblet of Fire and rushed towards it. The moment they touched it, a vortex suddenly appeared, transporting them out of Hogwarts. The Goblet of Fire had been fashioned into a portkey, and before the eyes of thousands, Harry and Cedric vanished. The audience erupted in confusion. What happened? Why are they gone? Who is the champion? The Ministry of Magic officials were bewildered. They had no idea what had happened. According to the rules, the champion would be decided the moment the champion touched the Goblet of Fire, but two contestants had vanished before everyone's eyes. Only Weiss, Dumbledore, and Moody knew the truth. Too slow, Moody kept glancing at his pocket watch. It's been a minute, and the portkey hasn't been activated yet. Don't worry, Dumbledore reassured Moody. With a magic item Wes gave us, Harry and the others can stay alive. 5 more minutes passed before everyone realized something was amiss. Cedric's parents frantically questioned ministry officials, and the audience grew restless, their minds aching for trouble. Professor McGonagall approached Dumbledore. What happened, Dumbledore? Her instincts told her that Dumbledore must know. Just as Dumbledore was about to explain, something in his arms suddenly began to heat up. He quickly pulled out his worn glove. There's no time for explanation, Minerva. I leave this place in your hands, Dumbledore said, then disappeared with Wes and Moody. Meanwhile, Harry and Cedric reappeared in a dark and desolate place, Little Hangleton Cemetery. Surrounded by ancient trees and desolate fields, the cemetery, filled with old tombstones and overgrown weeds, was shrouded in a thick mist, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. Voldemort had risen and summoned his Death Eaters. They surrounded Cedric and Harry, who stood back to back, wounded. The pocket watch Weiss had given Cedric, damaged by Voldemort's blow, lay smoking on the ground. Cedric's arm was pierced by a deep wound, and blood flowed continuously. Don't be afraid, Cedric reassured Harry. Professor Irving and the headmaster will be here soon. Harry swallowed nervously, his arm still bleeding. Voldemort was clearly surprised that he hadn't killed Cedric. His blood-red eyes fixed on Cedric, as if he could see through him. Cedric felt as if he were being stared at by a venomous snake, and his hair stood on end. It's an interesting magic item, but I wonder how many times it can block my attacks, Voldemort sneered. As soon as he finished speaking, a light green light shot out from his wand and headed straight for Cedric. Just as the fatal spell was about to hit Cedric, Weiss, Dumbledore, and Moody suddenly appeared in front of them. Weiss waved his wand and knocked Voldemort's spell away. Professor, Cedric exclaimed in surprise. Well done, Cedric, Weiss praised, then raised his wand and pointed it at Voldemort. The rest is up to us. Chapter 93 3 Minutes Battle. Dumbledore, Voldemort glared at the elderly figure fiercely. The Death Eaters were thrown into even greater panic upon seeing the Hogwarts headmaster. Why is Dumbledore here? One Death Eater cried in a trembling voice, tinged with panic. And Mad-Eye Moody, another Death Eater followed, his fear doubling. It's you, Voldemort said, noticing the young man behind Dumbledore. Senior, now is not the time for small talk, Weiss said. 5 golden spheres, deftly directed by him, flew in 5 different directions, gradually encircling the eerie graveyard. As the spheres settled into position, a soft yet impenetrable veil of light expanded between them, eventually forming a vast translucent dome that trapped all the Death Eaters. Now you can't escape. Without further ado, Weiss waved his wand, unleashing a massive attack. Blades condensed from the air and rained down like a torrential rain, each strike striking the Death Eaters with unerring precision. The Death Eaters attempted to uparrow it, but the wards Weiss had set up served only to confine them, rendering them impassable even by disapparition. Realizing their escape was hopeless, the Death Eaters launched a desperate counterattack. Their numerical superiority convinced them that if they could focus their forces on Weiss, they could turn the tide. Thus, the Dark Wizards unleashed a variety of complex spells to counter the attacks. Weiss quickly tracked the trajectory of each incoming spell and uttered a short yet powerful incantation, Thunderbolt. As the incantation finished, blasts of exploding curse after blast emanated from Weiss's wand, instantly shattering the targeted Death Eaters. Screams and explosions echoed throughout the graveyard. Meanwhile, the duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort reached a fever pitch. The battle between the two most powerful wizards was fraught with unpredictability, but Dumbledore now held the upper hand, firmly pinning Voldemort down and preventing him from distracting himself to aid his men. Mad-Eye Moody, meanwhile, guarded the two children, ensuring they were not caught in the fray. Despite this, Moody's gaze never left the battlefield, ready to join the fray if the situation demanded. Don't be afraid, he's only one, a Death Eater shouted, trying to boost morale. He can't apparate either. Surround him and reduce his range. With these words, a dozen Death Eaters, once Voldemort's most trusted lieutenants, leaped into action in unison. These men were experienced and well-trained. Now, beams of different colors crisscrossed the night sky, forming a dense and dangerous web of fire directed directly at Weiss's position. As wave after wave of spells descended upon Weiss, he calmly waved his wand and muttered, "Armor." A magical shield instantly formed around him. The incoming spells only rippled through the shield, unable to penetrate its sturdy defenses. The quantity is sufficient, but the quality is awful. Weiss then pointed his wand at the largest tree in the cemetery. As if infused with life, its branches wildly stretched out, its thick roots ripped from the soil, and the entire tree transformed into a gigantic tree man. Under Weiss's control, countless branches lashed out like whips, wrapping around the struggling dark wizards. One of the Death Eaters attempted to counterattack the tree man with fire magic, shouting, "Flame!" Suddenly, a ball of flame swept towards the tree man. Weiss simply opened his palm, and the flames were drawn into his palm, gradually converging into an orange fireball. Flame, Weiss responded with the same spell, but the energy released was many times greater than before. The Death Eater, unable to dodge, was engulfed in the flames, reduced to a charred corpse. Several other Death Eaters fared no better, their wrists entangled in branches, and bones snapped. Their wands dropped in agony, their resistance completely lost. The tree man bared its fangs mercilessly, devouring the powerless Death Eaters. After this fierce exchange, the once numerous Death Eater group was reduced to just 5. The Death Eaters struggled in despair. If they didn't act, they would all perish. Think of a solution, or we'll all die here. Show your identities. We're all prominent figures. If we reveal our identities, he won't dare to kill us. The Death Eaters hesitated in panic, unable to reach a consensus. As they hesitated, Weiss launched a new attack. With another gentle flick of his wand, the earth beneath his feet suddenly softened, transforming into a swamp. Then, with a flick of his wrist, Weiss cast a gravity spell, causing the Death Eaters to feel as if a mountain were bearing down on them, making breathing extremely difficult. As one Death Eater attempted to remove his mask to reveal himself, Weiss increased his magical output, instantly doubling the force of the gravity spell. Before the Death Eater could utter a single word, he was mercilessly swallowed up by the swamp, sinking into darkness along with his companions. The tree man was also not idle during this time, extending its branches to snap the wands of the defenseless Death Eaters. By the time the last Death Eater cried out in terror, "Wait, we surrender," it was too late. With the battle over, Weiss flicked his wand, restoring the ground to its original state, and the swamp returned to solid soil. The tree man also returned to its original position, though its leaves seemed even greener than before. The entire process took less than 3 minutes, but for the Death Eaters, it felt like a long nightmare. Weiss stood there, watching calmly. The battle was over so quickly that before Harry and Cedric could even recover from the tense atmosphere, Weiss had already dispatched over a dozen Death Eaters with impeccable efficiency. Moody stood by. Though known for his vigilance, he was surprised by Weiss's decisiveness and ruthlessness, leaving no one alive. Few dark wizards could possess such ruthless tactics, and this involuntarily heightened Moody's wariness of Weiss. Weiss turned his attention to the duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort. Dumbledore seemed to have the upper hand, but a complete defeat for Voldemort would be no easy task. Weiss then stepped toward the center of the battlefield. Voldemort's already distorted features grew even more horrific upon seeing Weiss. "It's you again, always ruining my plans." Weiss appeared calm and composed. He nodded slightly to Voldemort, his tone carrying a hint of courtesy. "Senior, we meet again." Chapter 94, The Death of Voldemort. Voldemort's moment of distraction gave Dumbledore the opportunity. A fire blaze spell nearly struck him, forcing him to dodge. However, this distraction proved costly, as Weiss immediately joined the fray. "Senior, distraction during combat is not a good habit," he declared, his wand waving. Million bombs, countless volleys of light projectiles rained down upon Voldemort. Voldemort quickly deployed his shield, but faced with a combined attack of 2 powerful wizards, it quickly collapsed. Seeing this, Dumbledore immediately cast the disarming charm, Disarm. An invisible force knocked Voldemort's wand out of his hand, depriving him of his most powerful weapon. Weiss was not so gentle. He unleashed a brutal Cruciatus curse, Crucio. The curse struck Voldemort relentlessly. Intense pain instantly ripped through his body, as if every bone was being crushed and every muscle was being torn apart. The agony prevented Voldemort from concentrating on mobilizing his magical power to fight back. Seizing this opportunity, Weiss threw a specially crafted chain, binding Voldemort tightly. Then, he cast a gravity spell, sending Voldemort sprawling to the ground in a state of disarray. "Bastard!" Voldemort roared in agony and humiliation, mobilizing all his magical power to try and break free. But after a fruitless struggle, He realized the chain was no ordinary one. It seemed to sense the flow of his magic, tightening with his struggles. The iron chain dug deep into his flesh, and blood began to seep out. "Senior, stop resisting." Weiss pulled a strange disc from his pocket and pressed it against Voldemort's body. Almost instantly, Voldemort felt his magic drain away, his skin growing paler until the last trace of color faded. The combined loss of blood and magic left Voldemort groggy, his vision blurring. Dumbledore, looking at the weakened Voldemort, sighed. "Tom." Voldemort managed to raise his head and, with his last remaining strength, said, "Dumbledore, don't be so hypocritical." Before he could finish his words, Weiss forced a vial of Veritaserum into his mouth. This further blurred Voldemort's vision. "This is a specially formulated potion, 10 times more potent than ordinary Veritaserum. Ask any questions you have. If it's too potent, I'm afraid he'll become an idiot." Dumbledore gathered his composure and began to demand the information he urgently needed: the location of the Horcruxes, the list of Death Eaters, how to resurrect, and other crucial information. Voldemort answered every question, revealing all his secrets without reservation. These answers completely extinguished any remaining vestiges of Dumbledore's compassion. Voldemort's crimes were irreparable. Ultimately, Dumbledore personally ended Voldemort's life and mercifully buried him in the Riddle family plot. Elsewhere, Moody, Harry, and Cedric captured Peter Pettigrew, who was attempting to escape by transforming into a rat. Pettigrew pleaded for mercy, hoping Harry would spare him for his father's sake. But Harry learned from Sirius that it was Pettigrew who had betrayed his parents, leading to their deaths. Hearing Pettigrew's shameless reference to his parents, Harry flew into a rage, punching and kicking him. Pettigrew curled up in a ball, trembling. Dumbledore arrived just in time and stopped him. "That's enough, Harry. Sirius still has his name to clear, and you don't want him to stay at Black House forever, do you?" Harry paused, took a few deep breaths, and tried to calm himself. "Did you see a large snake?" Weiss asked, referring to Nagini, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Cedric pointed to a large hole not far away. "While you were fighting, I saw a giant snake emerge from the hole." Dumbledore hurried to the hole's entrance and said with some regret, "It actually escaped." Weiss retrieved the 5 golden orbs, and with their return, the barrier lifted. Weiss explained, "This barrier has a flaw, it can't extend underground." "Is that snake important?" Cedric asked, puzzled. Despite its enormous size, the wizarding world boasted far more marvelous creatures, like the dragons of the Triwizard Tournament. Therefore, when he saw the snake, he paid it no particular attention, instead focusing on helping Moody and Harry capture Peter Pettigrew. Admittedly, Pettigrew's ability to escape was truly exceptional. If it weren't for Moody's prosthetic eyes tracking function, he might have gotten away. Weiss and Dumbledore didn't elaborate on Nagini's importance, as they didn't want to overload the children with information. Dumbledore then cast a restoration charm to restore the graveyard to its original state, ensuring that Muggles would not be aware of the battle that had taken place there. Before leaving, Dumbledore instructed Harry and Cedric to maintain secrecy and not reveal anything about what had happened. The 5 then returned to Hogwarts. As they arrived, all eyes were on them. Ministry officials, professors, spectators, and the families of the champions were eager to know what had just happened. Weiss and Moody quietly left the crowd, leaving the burden of explanation to Dumbledore. As the headmaster of Hogwarts, Dumbledore was the most suitable person to handle the situation. They quickly headed to the Durmstrang School of Witchcraft and Wizardry compound, hoping to find Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Karkaroff, but upon arrival, they found it empty. Has he escaped? Moody's prosthetic eye shifted, scanning for any possible trace. He can't get far. He can't appear inside Hogwarts, Weiss analyzed calmly. Based on the time Barty Crouch had left, he shouldn't have left the grounds of Hogwarts. Moody handed Weiss the cage containing Peter Pettigrew, who had transformed back into a mouse. "Leave the tracking to me. Don't let these Death Eaters get away from me." It looked like they had found some kind of trail. "Do you need my help?" Weiss asked. "I'm not old enough to handle a Death Eater." With that, he chased in one direction. Weiss watched Moody's retreating figure, then turned around and took Peter Pettigrew back to Hogwarts. Chapter 95 Review. That brat got away. He's as slippery as a loach. Moody returned to Hogwarts with a gloomy face. He went straight to Dumbledore's office and couldn't help but complain to Weiss, who had been waiting for him. Weiss didn't laugh at him. "Moody, at his age, was still fighting on the front lines against the Death Eaters, which was a remarkable achievement in itself. Moody himself was deeply concerned about this defeat, and even after Dumbledore returned to the office, he was still sulking. Dumbledore saw Moody's dejected expression and immediately understood the result. Knowing Moody's temper, he didn't try to persuade him, but brought up another matter. Karkaroff's body has been found. He's been dead for some time. It seems Voldemort and his men found him long ago. It was probably Karkaroff who put Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire. Killing someone when they are no longer useful is just like Voldemort. Weiss was disdainful of Voldemort's behavior of burning bridges after crossing them. Barty Crouch was also murdered, by his son. Dumbledore paused, as if gathering his thoughts. The mother died in Azkaban for her son, and the son killed his father himself. Even the knowledgeable Dumbledore didn't know how to assess this family. It was simply heartbreaking. This will give the Ministry of Magic a lot of scramble, Weiss gloated. The Ministry is still baffled by the events of the Triwizard Tournament, originally intended to save face and demonstrate unity and peace within the wizarding community. They had made thorough preparations to ensure the safety of the competitors, but it was unexpected that the victim, not the competitor, but a high-ranking ministry official and headmaster Karkaroff of Durmstrang School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, was in danger. Karkaroff's death was particularly fraught, as it implicated an international conflict. Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge was likely under immense pressure to find a reasonable explanation and calm public panic. The most important thing now is to deal with the Horcruxes. Dumbledore's lip fell. I didn't expect Tom to be so mad as to create so many. HMPH, Moody snorted. A man like him is capable of anything. The Gaunt family ring, the Ravenclaw diadem, the Hufflepuff cup, the Slytherin locket. Dumbledore sighed. They are all precious treasures. Choosing them as Horcruxes certainly suits Tom's pride. The next task was to destroy these Horcruxes and completely shatter Voldemort's hopes of resurrection. I'll leave the destruction of the Horcruxes to you. I'll put this rat in Azkaban first. Moody carried the cage containing Peter Pettigrew and left the headmaster's office, leaving only Weiss and Dumbledore in the office. Dumbledore looked at Weiss with a smile. I didn't expect to be able to deal with Tom so quickly. Your help makes things much easier. That was our deal, wasn't it? Weiss replied casually. You're too modest, Weiss. Dumbledore adjusted his glasses. Without you, I couldn't have kept Tom here. If he'd gotten away, the wizarding world would have been in turmoil. Dumbledore fumbled in his desk drawer. Although I'm the headmaster of Hogwarts, I have nothing else to offer you in return. I'll give you this. Dumbledore pulled out a thick notebook and handed it to Weiss. What's this? These are my experiences on the path of magic. Weiss began to flip through the notebook, which contained a wealth of magical records, not just white magic, but also much dark magic, even Weiss had never encountered. Dumbledore lost himself in memory. I once traveled the world with a friend. Under his influence, I became obsessed with the dark arts for a time, and did many things that I'm ashamed of. Weiss knew that the friend Dumbledore was referring to was Gellert Grindelwald, Dumbledore's lover from his youth. This past was a little-known secret in the wizarding world, but Weiss had seen the movie. Your talent is astonishing, Dumbledore said, looking at Weiss sternly. If you, Weiss, understanding Dumbledore's concerns, interrupted, I have no interest in ruling the wizarding world or changing it. Besides, I'm alone and have no followers. Dumbledore nodded, knowing Weiss had no ambition for power. I know you're drawn to magic, but I hope you stay on the right path and don't be drawn into darkness. Weiss simply smiled and nodded in response. What Dumbledore didn't know was that for Weiss, this world was merely a starting point, a place to gain a basic understanding of magic. Countless worlds and magic awaited him in the universe. Receiving Dumbledore's magical insights was truly a pleasant surprise. During his years teaching at Hogwarts, he had never ceased his exploration of magic, and had gained a wealth of valuable knowledge about otherworldly magic. His mind raced. Weiss now possessed a wealth of powerful knowledge and resources. The Philosopher's Stone in his possession could not only create the elixir of life, but also transmute ordinary metals into gold. Even the profound science of alchemy had become a mastery, no longer requiring him to travel to otherworldly realms to trade for rewards. The voodoo techniques he had extracted from Blackbeard's memories had provided him with a diverse range of magical tools. Aside from the recently acquired Golden Book of the Sun, the Black Book of the Dead, and Dumbledore's Guide to Magic, which he had yet to master, his magical abilities had already made a qualitative leap, bringing him one step closer to his original dream. Once he had fully assimilated the remaining knowledge, It would be time for him to take the next step. Weiss bid Dumbledore farewell and returned to his office. A man of action, he had immediately begun formulating a new study plan. Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic, looked with a troubled look at Moody and Peter Pettigrew, who had been brought to him in his restored human form. "Moody, you are no longer an order. It is not your job to apprehend criminals," Fudge said, attempting to defuse the situation with official rhetoric. "If you hadn't let him get away, you wouldn't be here bossing things around," Moody responded bluntly, his temper undimmed by the fact that he was the Minister of Magic. Fudge knew Moody's temper and didn't want to argue with this mad-eye man. Although Moody was no longer an Auror, he was still an experienced combat wizard and held a high reputation in the wizarding world. Arguing with him at this point would only complicate matters. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96 Voodoo Doll. Fudge took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "Moody, I understand how you feel, but we need to follow procedure. Peter Pettigrew is an important witness, and we need to ensure everything is conducted within the legal framework." Moody persisted in questioning Fudge about Sirius in his office, much to his displeasure. Having his men escort Pettigrew away, Fudge offered him tea and dismissed him, intending to end the meeting. But Moody was not about to leave. "Where's Sirius?" Moody demanded bluntly. "Don't play dumb with me. Now that Pettigrew has been apprehended, Sirius should be cleared of all charges." Fudge rubbed his forehead, appearing weary. "This is a Ministry of Magic matter, the agreement you made with Dumbledore." Hearing Dumbledore's name touched a raw nerve, and Fudge erupted in anger. "I am the Minister of Magic." Deeply disappointed with Fudge's attitude, Moody left the office without a backward glance. After Moody left, Fudge was left alone in his office, his anger reaching its peak. "Dumbledore, Dumbledore," his face turned a pale purple, and he suddenly threw everything on his desk to the floor. "They only care about Dumbledore. I'm the Minister of Magic." The frustration he'd long felt at the hands of Dumbledore finally erupted. Fudge felt ignored and belittled, a feeling he couldn't bear. He decided to take action to re-establish his authority and counter Dumbledore's influence. Upon returning to Hogwarts, Moody immediately approached Dumbledore and warned him to be wary of Fudge. "That fellow is very unhappy with you. I can see he's planning on dealing with you." Dumbledore didn't express much concern. Fudge's actions were exactly what he'd expected. His focus now was on destroying Voldemort's Horcruxes, particularly the most accessible one, the Ravenclaw item. "Thank you, Moody. I'll keep an eye on it. But our priority now is to find and destroy these Horcruxes. Only then can we finally put an end to Voldemort's threat." Dumbledore and Weiss arrived at the 8th floor of Hogwarts Castle. Following the information Voldemort had given them, they focused on the space they needed. They walked 3 times past the wall opposite the tapestry depicting the troll clubbing Barnabas. Suddenly, a remarkably smooth door appeared. "I once took a wrong turn on the way to the toilet and stumbled into this room. It was filled with all sorts of exquisite chamber pots," Dumbledore lamented. "I've never found it since. Even as headmaster, this school still has many secrets to uncover." Weiss was less sentimental. This was his first time there. Upon entering, they were greeted by a glittering, jeweled crown. Dumbledore took the tiara and examined it carefully. Inscribed on its base was Ravenclaw's famous motto, "Extraordinary wisdom is mankind's greatest treasure. It is said to increase the wearer's wisdom," Dumbledore observed with regret. "It's a pity that no one except Lady Ravenclaw knows how to make it." Weiss took the tiara and examined it carefully, but found nothing unusual. Perhaps wearing the tiara would make a difference? He immediately dismissed the idea, believing that a fragment of Voldemort's soul was still sealed within it. Wearing it would only give it an opportunity to exploit. "It's a pity, but it's the only way." Dumbledore gently tapped the tiara with the Elder Wand, and black flames instantly ignited. The tiara gradually melted under the Fiendfire's fire. The fragment of Voldemort's soul within the Horcrux struggled and screamed in the flames, eventually burning to ash along with the tiara. Dumbledore breathed a sigh of relief, now confirming the truth of the information he had received from Voldemort. Weiss felt a sense of regret, believing Voldemort had wasted such a precious artifact by turning it into a Horcrux. He also wanted to study the diadem, but considering the protective measures Voldemort had placed in each Horcrux, he didn't want to risk being harmed. Dumbledore temporarily delegated the school's daily affairs to Professor McGonagall while he searched for the other Horcruxes. To ensure the school's stability and safety, Dumbledore granted Weiss some of his headmaster's powers, including the ability to operate within the school. This year was truly thrilling and challenging for Harry and Cedric. Not only did they compete in the Triwizard Tournament, but they also faced Death Eaters together and witnessed Voldemort's death. These experiences forged a deep friendship, but they were bound to keep their feelings secret, sharing only their excitement with each other. Over time, the two became close friends, even to the point of jealousy. However, Harry felt a pang of guilt, as he had always harbored feelings for Cedric's girlfriend, Cho Chang. This feeling tormented him, and he wasn't sure how to deal with these complex emotions. Meanwhile, Weiss faced his own dilemma. Is the Philosopher's Stone so difficult to obtain? Weiss encountered immense difficulty in extracting its power. The sacrificial ritual was effective, extracting the pure energy from the stone through sacrifice, but the remaining spirits would riot and attack the nearest creatures. Such a large number of spirits could completely overwhelm a person's mind and soul, and even Weiss couldn't resist the onslaught of so many. What should I do? Weiss leaned back in his chair, his desk littered with magical books and notebooks. Sacrifice Jandy? The thought flashed through his mind, but he quickly rejected it. Jandy had served him tirelessly for years, and was so loyal to him that Weiss couldn't bring himself to do it. The problem was that the ritual required someone absolutely loyal to Weiss. Only Jandy could perform it, and only Jandy revered Weiss as a god. Who can replace Jandy? He rubbed his temple, trying to clear his mind. Replace, replace, the word echoed repeatedly in his mind. Suddenly, an idea struck him. I don't need someone to replace Jandy. I just need someone to take the damage. Voodoo doll. Damage diversion magic. His thoughts suddenly opened up. Weiss quickly stood up and began pacing the room, formulating a detailed plan. Chapter 97 Secret Meeting. How long have you been awake? Sirius grumbled, looking at Weiss's bloodshot eyes and tangled hair. You're not much better off now than when I escaped. Weiss ignored Sirius, shoved him aside, and walked straight into the Black Mansion. Upon entering, the first thing he saw was the dim hall. The furniture looked ancient. The sofas and tables were thickly dusted from neglect and reeked of mold. Don't you know how to clean up? Weiss covered his nose, looking at the dusty and musty living room. Sirius shrugged, nonchalantly replying, no need. It's much more comfortable here than Azkaban. At least there are no Dementors here. Weiss shook his head, frustrated by Sirius's attitude. Clean it up, he whispered the spell, and the entire living room was instantly spotless. The dust and musty smell vanished, and the furniture regained its shine. Sirius looked at the newly renovated living room. Even though he had seen Weiss perform magic many times, he was still struck by his profound mastery. Perhaps Dumbledore was the only other person who could cast a wandless spell with such ease. Before Weiss reached the stairs, a sharp voice echoed from the corridor, the prodigal son has brought an outsider back. Madam will be so heartbroken if she finds out. An elderly house elf stood in the shadows, spewing obscenities. Its skin seemed to be much thicker than necessary, hanging loosely from its frame, giving it an air of age and unhealth. Shut up, creature. Go back to your room, Sirius roared. Don't come out without my order. Creature stumbled back into his room, still muttering, Sirius is a traitor to the family. Only Master Regulus is worthy of inheriting the noble black name. I command you to shut up. Creature's head drooped, and finally, his voice was silent. His lips could still be seen moving in and out as he cursed, though no sound came out. Weiss hadn't come to the Black Mansion to just wander around. Slytherin's locket seemed to be in Creature's hand. The Black Mansion was decorated with portraits of every generation of the Black family. These figures spoke, moved, and were deeply concerned with family affairs. Sirius, annoyed by them, covered all the frames with black cloth and led Weiss to a room that had been prepared long ago. As soon as Weiss opened the door, he saw bookshelves filled with all kinds of books. I was planning on throwing all these books out. Sirius, driven from his family's home at a young age due to disagreements with their ideals, had lived with the Potters ever since. He had no attachment to the Black family, and naturally, no fondness for their belongings. You're such a spendthrift, Wes teased, feeling that Creature's criticism was spot on. Sirius shrugged, seemingly unfazed by the comment. You'd better get some rest. These books are all yours now. No need to rush sorting them out. With that, Sirius left the room, unwilling to be around a bookworm like Wes. Wes was truly exhausted, and only after a day's rest did he regain his energy. Later, the Wheeleyes, Moody, and several other members of the Order of the Phoenix arrived at the Black Mansion. They were all trusted figures by Dumbledore and considered among the wizarding elite. Although Voldemort's true form had been destroyed, the remaining Death Eaters remained hidden, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Adding to the headache, Voldemort had created so many Horcruxes that his plan to destroy him became even more complicated and difficult. Arthur Weasley entered the living room bearing a heavy message. "I hear Fudge is planning to take on Dumbledore. Is he mad?" Sirius asked incredulously. Moody snorted, as if anticipating this. "I knew this day would come." Everyone began to criticize Fudge. "The important thing now is to destroy the remaining Horcruxes." "Put everything else aside," Moody said bitterly, leaning on his cane. "Fudge doesn't have the skills to bring down Dumbledore." The truth was, they had all underestimated Fudge. After all, Fudge was Minister for Magic, wielding immense power and resources. Furthermore, the unexplained deaths of Karkaroff and Barty Crouch at Hogwarts had raised doubts about Dumbledore. Fudge had convened a hearing specifically to directly point the finger at Dumbledore, holding him responsible. Dumbledore was obliged to attend, where he argued, leaving Fudge speechless. Dumbledore explained the events in detail and presented ample evidence to prove his innocence. However, Fudge remained undeterred and dispatched his trusted confidants to Hogwarts to investigate the deaths of Karkaroff and Barty Crouch. Dumbledore would not readily agree, but as Minister for Magic, Fudge had legitimate reasons to investigate. Just as Fudge and his men celebrated a partial victory at the hearing, something unexpected occurred. The Dementors guarding Azkaban suddenly deserted their post and disappeared, allowing the prisoners to escape. Fudge sank dejectedly into his chair. "It's over, it's all over." As good news travels fast, bad news spreads far and wide. News of the Azkaban escape spread quickly throughout the wizarding world, sending everyone into a state of panic. Even Weiss hadn't anticipated how things would unfold. A few days later, Lucius Malfoy secretly sent a message demanding an immediate meeting with Weiss at the Leaky Cauldron. Weiss disguised himself simply, wearing a hat and a pair of glasses, and came to the Leaky Cauldron. Lucius Malfoy was still dressed the same way, wearing a large black cloak, and dressed very low-key. Ever since the prisoners escaped collectively, violent attacks have occurred every day, and the endless torture in Azkaban has made these prisoners more brutal and crazy. This has led to the entire Diagon Alley being unpopular. The Leaky Cauldron, which used to be bustling with people, now has few customers under the dim lights. Only real drunkards are in the mood to come here for entertainment at this time. Weiss walked into the bar, looked around, and soon found Lucius sitting in the corner. He walked straight over and sat down opposite Lucius. To be cautious, Weiss cast a few spells. Chapter 98 The Secret of the Black House. Weiss first used a soundproofing charm to muffle the sound of their conversation, then created an illusion where everyone else saw two drunkards drinking non-stop. "Didn't you say that you know who was killed?" Lucius demanded angrily. "Did they come looking for you?" The they he was referring to were the Death Eaters who had escaped Azkaban. Lucius rolled up his sleeves, revealing the dark mark on his forearm. 3 days ago, Weiss understood. Barty Crouch Jr. had made some unspoken promise that had caused the Dementors to betray the Ministry. This was probably related to the fact that after Dumbledore's lecture, the Ministry hadn't given them an explanation, instead tightening their watch over them. Lucius glanced around warily, hurriedly pulling his sleeves tighter, fearing discovery. "That madman tried to resurrect you-know-who. I contacted you while I was out shopping. You didn't get caught, did you?" Lucius shook his head with lingering fear. "I was watching the Triwizard Tournament on the day I was there, surrounded by Ministry officials. I used that as an excuse for not responding to you-know-who's call. Barty Crouch Jr. saw it firsthand, and they haven't suspected me yet." "Who are they?" "Bellatrix Lestrange, Electo Caro, Amicus Caro, Antonin Dolohov." Lucius paused, glanced at Weiss, and named the last two, Severus Snape and Peter Pettigrew. Weiss wasn't surprised by the others, but when he heard Pettigrew's name, he couldn't help but marvel at Pettigrew's luck, having managed to escape danger so many times. "What should I do next?" Lucius asked anxiously. "If those madmen discovered I was a traitor, he and his family would surely be killed." "Don't panic," Weiss soothed Lucius with magic, calming him. "Wear the ring I gave you, it will help you. Whatever they ask you to do, agree to it. If necessary, activate the port key and I'll be right there." Lucius's words calmed him down. He took a deep breath and told Weiss the Death Eater's next plan. Uniting with dark creatures like werewolves, giants, and vampires, Weiss scoffed. If they worked, they wouldn't be used as alchemical ingredients and potions for wizards. The most important thing is Voldemort's hideout. Can you find out? Lucius shook his head like a rattle. Little Barty doesn't trust me. He only trusts Bella and the others who've just been released from Azkaban. I just need to provide supplies and information. Lucius handed Weiss a shopping list. It listed some daily necessities, which didn't require special attention. However, it also included many rare items such as precious herbs, dragon's blood, and phoenix feathers, which were difficult to collect at the moment. Without Voldemort, they're nothing more than a mob. The confidence Weiss conveyed in his words also infected Lucius, and he was no longer as nervous as he had been at the beginning. He patted Lucius on the shoulder and said, "Don't be afraid. Everything is under control." When Weiss rushed back to the Black Mansion, he found Dumbledore already waiting there. He walked into the living room and saw Dumbledore sitting in an old armchair, holding a cup of tea. "I have something to tell you," Dumbledore smiled. "It just so happens that I have something to tell you too." "I think we should be talking about the same thing," Weiss nodded, indicating that Dumbledore should speak first. "The situation in the Ministry of Magic has become more and more complicated recently. And Fudge's hostility towards me has become public. Not only did he try to blame me for the deaths of Karkaroff and Barty Crouch at the hearing, he also sent his confidants to Hogwarts to investigate. In addition, the collective escape of prisoners in Azkaban has also brought tremendous pressure to the Ministry of Magic." Weiss listened carefully, and then told the information provided by Lucius. "Lucius has just provided some important information about the Death Eaters. Barty Crouch Jr. and other Death Eaters who escaped from Azkaban are planning a series of actions, including uniting dark creatures such as werewolves, giants and vampires. They also made a list of supplies, which requires a lot of precious herbs, dragon blood, phoenix feathers and other rare items." Dumbledore put down his teacup and stretched. "It seems that we underestimated little Barty. His mind and strategy should not be underestimated. Can Professor Snape contact Voldemort?" "Of course, but we have to wait until the last moment," Dumbledore replied. "They need Severus to brew potions for Voldemort. Then the initiative is in our hands. The potion will not be concocted until we destroy all the Horcruxes. Of course, it is not so easy to make a potion to resurrect Voldemort." Dumbledore blinked. "How is the task of collecting the Horcruxes going?" As soon as Weiss finished speaking, Dumbledore's expression became serious. He took out a gold ring from his clothes, on which was inlaid a black gem engraved with a Peveril crest. Weiss's eyes were immediately attracted to the black gem. This gem is not only a family heirloom of Marvolo Gond, but also one of the legendary 3 Deathly Hallows, the Resurrection Stone. It is said that it can resurrect the dead and is a treasure that countless wizards dream of. As the holder of the Elder Wand, Dumbledore naturally would not fail to recognize the Resurrection Stone. However, now that the Resurrection Stone is inlaid in the ring, if it is taken off rashly, it may be attacked by Voldemort's magic. Dumbledore today is not as anxious as in the original book. He wants to find a safer way to destroy the Horcrux. "I have good news to tell you. Slytherin's locket is here." "Really?" Dumbledore was still a little surprised to hear the news, but he did not doubt Weiss. "It's right here." Wes pointed at the ground. "You mean, Slytherin's locket is in this house?" Wes didn't keep the secret. "I saw it in the hands of Kreacher, the Black family's house elf, but Kreacher hid." "Didn't Voldemort hide Slytherin's locket deep in a cave? Didn't he carefully arrange numerous mechanisms so that only those who dared to drink the deadly poison could touch the ancient treasure?" What was unexpected was that this dark holy object appeared in the hands of Kreacher, the Black family's house elf. Weiss didn't intend to explain, but just made sure that he was not mistaken, and Slytherin's locket was indeed in Kreacher's hands. Chapter 99 Alchemy Array. While not as grand and mysterious as Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the Black Mansion housed numerous secret rooms, difficult for even the most experienced wizards to discover. One particularly secluded area even served as the last refuge of the house elf, Kreacher, a place even Sirius, the heir to the Black family, could not easily find. But Sirius had another plan. "Kreacher, show yourself before me immediately." With a resounding call, Sirius, leveraging his position as head of the Black family, issued the command. Almost instantly, the air trembled, and Kreacher appeared before them. "Kreacher," Sirius grasped Kreacher's collar. "Hand over Voldemort's Horcrux, but Creature simply lowered his head and replied in a barely audible voice, "I don't know what a Horcrux is." Seeing this attitude, Sirius intensified his anger. He lifted Creature up and forced him to look directly into his eyes. "Stop playing dumb. Hand it over." Just when Sirius was about to lose control of his anger, Dumbledore on the side stopped Sirius's behavior in time. "Calm down, Sirius, violence will not solve the problem." After a brief silence, Sirius took a deep breath. Then he suppressed his anger and spoke again. "Creature, I warn you for the last time, hand over the locket immediately." Faced with the uncompromising demands of his master, Creature could not disobey Sirius's order. He slowly stretched out his palm, and in his palm lay a well-made locket. Sirius snatched the locket, and Creature's emotions collapsed instantly, and he began to howl. Woo-woo, it kept banging its head against the wall, hurting itself desperately. Blood soon flowed from its forehead, but it seemed not to feel pain, but continued to repeat this self-harming behavior. Creature is a useless house elf. He didn't even complete Master Regulus's last mission. This sudden scene attracted the attention of other members of the Order of the Phoenix, and they gathered around. Sirius stood aside with a frown on his face. He had never heard of the connection between his brother Regulus and the Horcruxes. Regulus? What does this have to do with Regulus? Why is this locket in your hands? No concealment is allowed, tell me honestly. Faced with a harsh questioning of his master, Creature became even more agitated. Sirius is a bad seed, Master Regulus is the true heir of the Black family, it cursed angrily. Why wasn't Sirius dead? Under the gaze of everyone, Creature cried and recounted the dusty past in bits and pieces. That year, Master Regulus took me to a cave. Creature cried and recounted how Regulus discovered Voldemort's true face and realized that joining the Death Eaters was a wrong choice. In order to make up for his mistakes and protect his family from being implicated, Regulus decided to stop Voldemort's evil deeds. Regulus resolutely drank the poison guarding the Horcrux in exchange for the Slytherin locket. Before his death, he handed this important item to Creature and asked it to do everything possible to destroy the Horcrux and not to tell anyone about it. On the way back, due to extreme thirst, Regulus was unfortunately dragged into the water by the inferi lurking in the water and died. At the end, Creature was sobbing and could hardly continue. I did not complete the task assigned by Master Regulus. I tried every possible way to destroy this damn locket but failed. Sirius held Slytherin's locket in a daze. I didn't know Regulus actually. At this moment, he seemed to have recognized his younger brother, the man he once thought was weak and followed the dark forces. Dumbledore, the Wheel Eyes, and even the usually calm Moody seemed a little dazed. Among the Death Eaters, there was such a brave man who silently resisted Voldemort and even sacrificed his own life. Regulus is a good boy. Moody patted Sirius on the shoulder. He seemed to be a little unskilled in saying comforting words. The surrounding Order members were also moved by Regulus's deeds. Sirius's expression became even more complicated. Tears involuntarily fell from the corners of his eyes, and his heart was filled with mixed feelings. I didn't know anything. Sirius' voice was choked with sobs. He was proud of what Regulus had done, but at the same time, he felt a deep sense of self-blame. As a member of the Order of the Phoenix, he had once firmly opposed Voldemort, but because of a misunderstanding, he caused the death of his best friends James and Lily, and he himself spent a long time in Azkaban. During this time, he made no contribution to the fight against the dark forces and could only wallow in despair and self-pity. Compared to Regulus, Sirius felt ashamed. Dumbledore noticed a change in Sirius's mood and gently reminded him, everyone has different experiences, but the most important thing now is to destroy this locket. That's right. Sirius wiped the tears from his face and tightly grasped the locket in his hand. He couldn't let Regulus' efforts go to waste. At the same time, Creature was still immersed in self-blame and kept punishing himself. Stop it, Creature. Sirius had never treated Creature so gently. Don't punish yourself anymore. We will destroy this locket. Really? Creature couldn't believe it. I tried every way but failed. We have Dumbledore and Weiss. Sirius pointed at them. Not only this locket, we will completely destroy Voldemort and avenge Regulus, James, Lily, and all the suffering people. You didn't lie to me. Creature looked at Sirius eagerly. I think you can be a witness. Wes added. Creature nodded eagerly and agreed. In the basement of the Black Mansion, members of the Order of the Phoenix gathered here. Weiss had just finished drawing the last stroke of a complex alchemical array, and the entire array was emitting a faint light. That's it. Weiss stood at the edge of the alchemical array, took a deep breath, and then activated the alchemical array. With a faint humming sound, the air in the entire basement seemed to vibrate. Marvolo Gaunt's ring and Slytherin's locket were placed in the center of the alchemical array. Under the gaze of everyone, they began to slowly rotate, emitting a strange halo of light. Chapter 100, Catch Them All. The power of the alchemical circle gradually intensified, and cracks began to appear on the surfaces of the two Horcruxes, as if invisible hands were tearing at them. An unsettling aura hung in the air, and even a faint wail could be heard, the sound of the fragments of Voldemort's soul remaining within the Horcruxes dissipating in agony. Suddenly, a burst of dark magic erupted from the Horcruxes, a defense mechanism Voldemort had preempted. Weiss had been prepared, having placed a powerful ward around the alchemical circle. The force was firmly blocked by the ward, but its sheer force still astonished everyone present. This level of dark magic could easily destroy a full-grown wizard, Moody accurately assessed. Arthur Weasley expressed keen interest in Weiss's circle. It's also unique, seemingly some kind of alchemy. When the two Horcruxes were finally destroyed, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, especially Creature, who finally lifted the weight that had weighed on him for years. Dumbledore carefully put away the Resurrection Stone, a crucial item they had retrieved from Marvolo Gaunt's ring. Only two Horcruxes remain, Arthur said with some relief. Don't be careless, Moody continued, still on guard. The remaining two won't be easy to find. We don't even know where Bella hid the Hufflepuff cup. Molly also looked worried. Yes, Bella is a die-hard Voldemort loyalist, and we don't know where she's hiding it. Leave these matters to me, Dumbledore said confidently. They can't hide. Afterward, the Order of the Phoenix members left one after another, each returning to their respective posts. Since the escape of the prisoner of Azkaban, the Ministry's workload has skyrocketed, and everyone has a vast amount of tasks to complete. Before Dumbledore left, Weiss posed a question: can Professor Snape find out where they're hiding? Dumbledore shook his head. No, Bellatrix and Barty Crouch Jr. are very cautious, and Severus hasn't fully earned their trust yet. He paused, then changed the subject. But we can lure them out of their lair, deep in the Brocelian forest, France, rarely visited year-round. 5 mysterious figures quietly emerged from the quiet forest. In front was a short, portly man, clearly nervous. He gripped his wand tightly, glancing around, ready to react at any moment. His right hand, a silver-white prosthetic leg, stood out against the moonlight. Suddenly, a dark figure flashed by, and Peter panicked, shouting, "Avada, go eat the big melon!" A flash of green light appeared, and the figure collapsed. It turned out to be a wild deer. Peter Pettigrew breathed a sigh of relief, but was immediately met with the jeers of Antonin Dolohov. "How dare you, such a coward, serve your master?" Antonin had a long, pale, twisted face, dark skin, a broad build, and a brutal streak. He was a loyal servant of Voldemort, his hands stained with the blood of countless people. "Tisk," Antonin spat disdainfully. "A little rat like you," Bellatrix Lestrange interrupted him. "Antonin, enough. Peter Pettigrew has made contributions, and this mission couldn't have been done without him." Hearing Bellatrix's words, Antonin fell silent, still gazing at Peter with disdain. Peter Pettigrew remained silent, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Damn it. Why was I sent on this mission? Why was you-know-who defeated? Is it too late to surrender to Dumbledore now? No way. Sirius wants to tear me to pieces. Peter Pettigrew was filled with regret. Despite their best efforts, the 5 Death Eaters failed to notice they had stepped into the wards Weiss had set up. As the wards suddenly rose around them, their hearts sank, realizing something was amiss. Enemy attack, it's a trap, retreat. Bellatrix and her companions reacted instantly, but it was too late. Apparition had failed, and the message hadn't spread. As Weiss loomed before them, their hearts sank. Facing a wizard on Voldemort's level, they knew they stood little chance. Peter Pettigrew, desperate, transformed back into his rat form and attempted to escape by burrowing through a hole, but Weiss's wards were impenetrable, and his attempt failed. Bellatrix and the other 3 Death Eaters immediately launched an attack, attempting to break through the encirclement. Avada, bite the melon. A flash of green light shot towards Weiss. 10,000 bullets, countless spells, like bullets, flew towards him. Fire, huge balls of fire erupted from their wands. Crucio, painful curses tried to break his will. Weiss's armored body blocked each powerful attack. His shield was impenetrable, showing no sign of being breached. Weiss then raised his wand and pointed it at the still struggling Peter Pettigrew. "Drown, Peter Pettigrew collapsed, unconscious. The other 4 Death Eaters panicked, but they were trapped within the ward, with nowhere to escape. Anton enchanted spells, sweat dripping from his forehead. A cloud of black smoke erupted from his wand, a powerful dark magic. Weiss waved his wand, and a fiery flame curse instantly incinerated the mist. Disarm, he shouted, followed by 4 spells, striking Bellatrix, Antonin, and the other 2 Death Eaters. Their wands flew through the air, and before they even hit the ground, Weiss's stunning spell had already knocked them unconscious. The whole process was clean and neat, and Weiss subdued the 5 Death Eaters with almost no effort. This time he did not kill them, but chose to capture them alive. Weiss then snapped his fingers, and Jandy immediately appeared. He tied up the 5 people tightly and gave them the water of life and death, which put them into deep sleep. Keep an eye on them. Jandy then took 4 of the Death Eaters into the box and kept them under strict guard. Weiss personally grabbed Bellatrix and activated the portkey. The next second, they were back at the Black Mansion. As soon as he appeared in the basement of the Black Mansion, Moody couldn't wait to ask, did it work? End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.